Chapter 1444. Hearing Yan Qingyi's boast, not only was Tang Jing shocked, but the other two were also shocked. They didn't understand how she could resolve this so-called world-ending crisis. Seeing her attention on the spatial gate, Tang Zheng's head moved and he asked thoughtfully, "Do you want to use the spatial gate to resolve this so-called world-ending crisis?" Yan Qingyi didn't even turn her head and said without blinking, "Of course, if the sky beyond heaven is completely destroyed, then the world-ending crisis will naturally disappear." Destroy the sky beyond heaven? Tang Zheng was shocked. Yes, the sky beyond heaven is the source of the world's destruction. Destroy it and this world will naturally be safe. Yan Qingyi said without any ripples. Tang Zheng was confused and asked curiously, "Didn't you say I was the source of the world's destruction? It was you who led the people of the sky beyond heaven to this world, causing the world's destruction." Yan Qingyi said. As soon as this was said, Tang Zheng's heart thumped. He and Xiao Bai looked at each other and thought of the disturbance caused by the last time their divine sense crossed over to the sky beyond heaven. In addition, they also planned to cross over with their physical bodies. In this way, he really could attract the people of the sky beyond heaven to this world. Should they stop the idea of crossing over to the sky beyond heaven again? Tang Zheng was confused. His eyes were filled with worry and he didn't know what to do. Xiao Bai's eyes narrowed and said, "Master, don't listen to her nonsense. Moreover, she wants to rely on her own strength to destroy the sky beyond heaven. She really overestimates herself. Now that she has opened the spatial gate, this will really attract the people of the sky beyond heaven to this world. Maybe she is the real culprit of the world's destruction." Li Xiaotian's eyes lit up. He obviously agreed with this statement. Xiao Bai understood the situation of the sky beyond heaven, so his words were reasonable and credible. "Tang Zheng, don't let your imagination run wild. Xiao Bai's words are reasonable." Li Xiaotian advised earnestly, afraid that Tang Zheng would be confused by Yan Qingyi's words. Yan Qingyi coldly looked at Xiao Bai and snorted, "I will destroy this world. What a joke. I am saving this world, you are the sinners of this world." "Sinner, sinner," Tang Zheng heard this and couldn't help muttering, as if possessed. Suddenly, he raised his head, his eyes shining brightly as he stared at Yan Qingyi, saying, "I don't know if I'm a sinner, but I do know one thing, and that is that by opening the spatial door right now, you're putting this world in danger. I definitely won't just sit by and watch." Yan Qingyi's eyes flashed and said, "You want to go against me? I have always had a good relationship with the Yan family. Moreover, we used to be very close. I don't know how you became like this, but if you really think so, then you are going against me," Tang Zheng said through gritted teeth. Seeing that Tang Zheng was finally resisting, Li Xiaotian and Xiao Bai both let out a sigh of relief. They were previously afraid that Tang Zheng would be bewitched by Yan Qingyi, but it seemed that their worries were unnecessary. "If you want to go against me, then go against me. Who's afraid of who?" Li Xiaotian said fearlessly. "Excellent," Yan Qingyi praised. "Then don't blame me for being merciless and ignoring our past relationship." Xiao Bai flew into a rage and attacked Yan Qingyi with a whoosh. He slapped out with his palm and a ball of flames gushed out. The raging flames seemed to burn a hole in the sky. The raging flames flew straight towards Yan Qingyi. Boom! A loud sound rang out, but Yan Qingyi did not move. The place where she stood seemed to have become a vacuum, forming a huge sphere. The flames collided with the sphere, flowing with brilliant colors, but it could not attack Yan Qingyi at all. The others were shocked by this scene. It was inconceivable. One had to know that Xiao Bai's attack contained boundless anger, but it was so casually blocked by her. Just how terrifying was her strength? Tang Zheng also realized this point. She understood Yan Qingyi relatively well in the past, but ever since she returned from the heavenly gate, everything about her changed. She could no longer be judged by common sense. Xiao Bai's attack did not succeed, and he became even more furious. He waved his hand, and a long flame spread out from his palm, finally condensing into a large saber. The large saber was burning with raging flames, and it rippled with blazing air waves. Whoosh! There was a loud sound, and the air waves parted to both sides. Wherever the flaming saber passed, the air crackled. Boom! Another loud sound rang out, and this time, the invisible sphere finally could not withstand it. With a crack, it broke into pieces. The flaming saber continued to slash towards Yan Qingyi with irresistible force. Huh! A strange look appeared in Yan Qingyi's eyes, as if she did not expect Xiao Bai's attack to be so fierce that it actually broke through her defense. At this point, she did not have time to think, and raised one hand. The flaming saber stopped, firmly held between her two fingers, and did not move an inch. The flames kept moving like small fire snakes, but there was no way for it to climb up her arm. An invisible force blocked all of this. Xiao Bai's expression suddenly changed. He was very clear about the power of his flames, but there was no way for them to climb up Yan Qingyi's body. This was enough to explain a lot of problems. Yan Qingyi was indeed terrifyingly powerful. However, he didn't retreat. With a thought, the flame saber transformed into a giant flame python. It wrapped around Yan Qingyi, tightly wrapping around her. Not even a drop of water could escape. Her figure disappeared within the python. The raging flames sealed off all directions, and Yan Qingyi did not have a chance to escape. Xiao Bai's eyes revealed a pleased look, as if he thought that this move would definitely make Yan Qingyi obediently submit. Tang Zheng raised his head to look at the sky. The spatial door was still in its original state, and had not shrunk, let alone disappeared. His heart trembled. This meant that Yan Qingyi was still controlling the spatial door, which also meant that she was not injured. He hurriedly shouted, "Xiao Bai, be careful." Xiao Bai revealed a suspicious look, not understanding what Tang Zheng meant. Bang! Suddenly, there was an earth-shattering explosion. The air waves spread in all directions, and the edges of the somersault cloud shook a few times. The giant flaming python exploded into pieces, turning into many balls of flames that shot in all directions. Xiao Bai was also sent flying backward. He finally understood what Tang Zheng meant by being careful. He was happy too early. His attack did not really defeat Yan Qingyi, and the so-called upper hand was just an illusion. Tang Zheng dodged and caught Xiao Bai. He held his wrist and checked, and only then was he relieved that there was no serious injury. The two of them landed on the somersault cloud, and Li Xiaotian hurriedly asked with concern, "How is Xiao Bai?" Tang Zheng calmly shook his head and said, "He's fine." "What do we do?" Li Xiaotian hesitated for a moment, but in the end, he asked. At the same time, she felt extremely guilty. If the Li Palace's intelligence had been more accurate, they would not have encountered such a situation, and perhaps everything would have changed. Yan Qingyi's strength had far exceeded her expectations. She simply could not guess what would happen next. Chapter 1445. Yan Qingyi looked at the approaching Tang Zheng step by step, and finally turned around to face him, saying, "If you stop me, then the one who will suffer will be you." Tang Zheng smiled but did not say anything, and asked back, "Is that so?" Before he finished speaking, he took a big step forward, and his aura surged. Shwa! The sword light flashed, and the hidden profound sword was already firmly grasped in his hand. The hidden profound sword fell from the sky, and slashed towards Yan Qingyi, like a hot knife through butter. Yan Qingyi once again stretched out a hand, just like when she was dealing with Xiao Bai. Pooh! A streak of blood flew out from her palm. The hidden profound sword had injured her. Her eyes widened in shock, and she hurriedly retreated, unable to hide the shock on her face. What sword is this? She did not care about the bleeding wound, and her gaze locked onto the hidden profound sword. With her knowledge and experience, she had never seen such a frightening treasure. Hidden profound sword. Tang Zheng said without hesitation. Yan Qingyi softly repeated, "Hidden profound sword?" Obviously, she had never heard of this name before, and curiously asked, "Where did it come from?" "I made it myself." Tang Zheng did not hide it. "You made it?" Yan Qingyi's expression changed. She was very clear on how powerful a treasure of this level could be, and this actually came from Tang Zheng's hands. How could he have such a powerful ability? Tang Zheng did not want to dwell on this question, and pointed the sword at Yan Qingyi, saying, "Close the spatial door, and everything can be discussed." "Impossible," Yan Qingyi said resolutely and decisively. "Then don't blame me for being impolite." Tang Zheng leapt forward, and the hidden profound sword fiercely slashed towards Yan Qingyi. He did not have the slightest intention of underestimating her, and focused 120% of his attention. Where the sword pointed, a huge crack appeared in the air. Yan Qingyi's hands crossed, and a huge hand appeared in the air, 5 fingers closed, and firmly grasped the hidden profound sword. Pung! Sparks flew everywhere from the hidden mystic sword as it clashed with the giant hand. Tang Zheng was shocked. There was no difference between him and Xiao Bai. The only advantage he had was the hidden sword. Therefore, this caught Yan Qingyi off guard and greatly exceeded her expectations. Puff! The hidden mystic sword pierced through the giant hand, and the giant hand immediately disintegrated into nothingness. However, before Tang Zheng could let out a sigh of relief, another giant hand appeared out of thin air. It descended from the sky and suppressed the hidden sword. This time, the hidden mystic sword did not pierce through the giant hand. The 5 fingers of the giant hand were spread open like a huge mountain, towering and majestic with the might of the heavens. Tang Zheng immediately felt a strong pressure on his shoulders, as if there really was a towering mountain falling from the sky. This kind of pressure made it hard to breathe, and even their heartstrings trembled. "Let's see if you can escape from my 5-finger mountain." Yan Qingyi's thunderous voice rumbled into Tang Zheng's ears. 5-finger mountain? Tang Zheng's head trembled. He stared straight at the giant hand descending from the sky, as if it really was the 5-finger mountain. If he was really suppressed by the 5-finger mountain, then he would not be able to turn the tables for the rest of his life. He took a deep breath, and his chi sank into his dantian. He shouted himself hoarse, and his voice soared into the sky. He roared, "Break!" Puff! The 5-finger mountain was pierced through, forming a huge hole. Tang Zheng broke free from the 5-finger mountain and flew into the sky. He no longer cared about Yan Qingyi, and went straight for the spatial door. Because the attack just now caused the spatial door to tremble. It was obvious that Yan Qingyi had to be distracted to deal with Tang Zheng. The spatial door would involve most of the body and mind, and when Yan Qingyi could not focus on protecting the spatial door, it would face collapse. Tang Zheng was well versed in the laws of space, so he was very clear about this point. He also very keenly discovered this flaw. He did not care about his own safety, and directly rushed to the spatial door. The pitch-black spatial door seemed to have a huge temptation, luring him to step into it. He took a deep breath, and restrained the huge temptation. With a thought, he urged the laws of space, and pushed his hand forward, exerting a mysterious force on the spatial door. Immediately, the spatial door trembled violently, as if it was about to collapse. If it were not for Yan Qingyi's distraction, and not focusing on protecting the spatial door, causing the spatial door to tremble, Tang Zheng would not have been able to seize the opportunity to use the laws of space to destroy the spatial door. Once a spatial door successfully appeared, and under the wholehearted support of its owner, it was extremely difficult for an ordinary person to destroy the spatial door. Tang Zheng understood this point. Moreover, Yan Qingyi's strength was extraordinary, and the stability of the spatial door she created was especially unusual. He had no choice but to look for a flaw, and then take advantage of the situation to completely destroy the other party's plan. Yan Qingyi saw the changes in the spatial door, and her mind was greatly shaken. Her expression changed greatly, and she had a look of disbelief. If Tang Zheng's battle prowess had increased, and even refined a divine weapon like the hidden profound sword, she might have been surprised, but she definitely would not be as surprised as she was now. Not only was she surprised, she was even shocked. She was well versed in the laws of space, and understood how difficult it was to comprehend the laws of space. She had comprehended them from the heavenly Tao, and it was equivalent to the heavenly Tao imparting them to her. According to the heavenly Tao, the laws of space were one of the ultimate mysteries. Very few people knew about it, and even fewer people could master the laws of space. Yan Qingyi thought that perhaps she was the only one in the world who knew the laws of space. Even if she was not the only one, the others definitely did not include Tang Zheng. But the scene in front of her gave her a vivid lesson, letting her see the true reality. She was not the only one who knew the laws of space, and Tang Zheng was one of them. Moreover, he could use this flaw to destroy her spatial door. Stop! Yan Qingyi shouted, just like how Tang Zheng and the others tried to stop her, but it was pale and powerless, to no avail. Yan Qingyi hurriedly tried to salvage the situation, trying to stabilize the spatial door. Tang Zheng immediately saw through her attempt, and with an irresistible force, he once again used the laws of space, disintegrating the last trace of the spatial door's power. Rumble. With a loud bang, the spatial door was destroyed in mid-air, and brilliant lights filled the sky, dazzling everyone. Yan Qingyi's face immediately turned as white as paper, watching this scene in disbelief. She never dreamed that her plan would be so easily interrupted. The spatial door was not something that could be opened casually. She had not comprehended much of the laws of space, and with her current strength, she could only open the spatial door once. Now that the spatial door was destroyed, she had no way to open it again in a short period of time. This was the reason why she was so heartbroken. Her eyes burned with anger as she glared fiercely at Tang Zheng. Although there was a distance between them, it was as if she wanted to burn him to ashes. Tang Zheng, you ruined my plans, so don't blame me for being merciless. She hysterically roared as if she had gone mad. Translator, Transin Editor, Transin. Chapter 1446. Yan Qingyi was hysterical. In an instant, the wind and clouds changed color. The sky was dark, as if the sky was about to fall. A huge hand was faintly discernible in the clouds. It was incomparably huge, as if there was only one hand left in the vast sky. Whoosh! The wind blew, and the huge hand came down from the sky. Bang! The ground collapsed. Gravel flew all over the sky. Smoke and dust rose into the sky. A huge hand print appeared on the ground. Although the huge hand had not arrived, the power had already passed through the air. Layer after layer, fiercely transmitted over. Tang Zheng's breathing suddenly stopped. He was almost unable to breathe because of the power. The somersault cloud floating in the air was also affected. It swayed and quickly fell down. Bang! The somersault cloud landed on the ground. The clouds trembled. Li Xiaotian and Xiao Bai, who were standing on top of it, almost fell down. The two suddenly raised their heads and stared at Tang Zheng, who was floating in the air. He was the first to bear the brunt. The impact was definitely greater. However, he resisted with difficulty. He raised the hidden mysterious sword. His expression was unyielding. He was like a stubborn bone. He would definitely not yield to pressure. Even if it was the might of the heavens. Tai Chi dual sword technique. Suddenly, a thunderous explosion came out of his mouth. It was earth-shattering. The hidden mysterious sword shone brightly. He had lost the battle spirit for too long. It had been a long time since he used this sword technique. But as his cultivation increased, the Tai Chi dual sword technique had already advanced by leaps and bounds. It had reached a terrifying level. The hidden mysterious sword's light was like a blazing sun. It lit up the entire sky. Even the dark sky was illuminated with a dazzling light. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Rays of sword light flew out from the hidden mysterious sword. In an instant, it was like thousands of small swords. They surrounded the hidden mysterious sword and danced. From afar, it was as if the hidden mysterious sword had grown from small to large. It became a huge sword. From Tang Zheng's hand, it extended to the horizon. It stood between the heaven and earth. It was majestic and gave people a strong sense of oppression. When Yan Qingyi saw this sword, her eyes could not help but narrow into slits. She could feel the power of this sword. But she did not retreat. Her hand pressed down. Under the five-finger mountain, it was as if everything was going to be crushed into powder. The hard rocks on the ground cracked inch by inch and turned into fine powder. The air seemed to have been compressed as well, producing a series of muffled sounds, unable to bear this shocking pressure. Tang Zheng was still standing straight, his spine was not bent in the slightest, and the hidden mysterious sword was also as straight as a blade. "Break!" Tang Zheng shouted. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The tens of thousands of swordlights surrounding the hidden profound sword flew out in unison, soaring into the sky, rushing towards the five-finger mountain in the clouds. Whoosh! 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 Whoosh whoosh! 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 Whoosh whoosh! On the contrary, this seemed to have ignited Yan Qingyi's fury. The speed of the palm's descent increased greatly, and a loud whistling sound rang out. The only thing left in the world was this sharp whistling sound. As far as the naked eye could see, the sky became even darker, and a dark mass descended. A fear that came from the bottom of his heart spread to every cell in his body. Tang Zheng kept his composure, and his expression did not change at all. He activated the hidden sword, and the power of the Tai Chi two forms sword art was fully displayed in an instant. The sword lights that were dancing in the air did not disappear. Instead, they circled in the sky and formed a huge Tai Chi yin-yang fish in the blink of an eye. One bright and one dark, mutually reinforcing and harmonious, flickering with radiance, covering the five-finger mountain. Rise! Tang Zheng let out another muffled shout, and the hidden mystic sword disappeared. Yes, the hidden mystic sword disappeared from Tang Zheng's hand as if it had never appeared. Yan Qingyi suddenly realized that something was wrong and became alert. Her eyes widened, as if she wanted to see what kind of trick Tang Zheng was playing. Hidden mystic sword, slash! Tang Zheng roared, and a shining giant sword flew out from the Tai Chi yin-yang fish, and slashed directly at the five-finger mountain. Oh no! Facing the brilliant sword power, Yan Qingyi secretly shouted, and activated her mana, and the five-finger mountain became bigger and heavier. The hidden mystic sword rushed to the sky, and the five-finger mountain fell from the sky. One rose and one fell, and they were at each other's throats, like sworn enemies. Puff! The hidden mystic sword pierced through the five-finger mountain, and the five-finger mountain stopped abruptly in the air. The light of the hidden mystic sword also dimmed until it completely disappeared, and it fell back into Tang Zheng's hand lightly. The Tai Chi yin-yang fish also disappeared. Everyone's eyes were focused on the five-finger mountain, and they wondered what this giant palm would become. Yan Qingyi's face became pale, and her eyes dimmed. Boom! With a loud noise, the five-finger mountain exploded, rolling up the air and the sky, and a giant whirlpool appeared in the air, as if it was going to shatter the sky. This huge scene deeply shocked everyone. Puff! A mouthful of blood was spat out from Yan Qingyi's mouth, and she was on the verge of collapse. In the end, she could not hold on, and fell from the sky. Tang Zheng's eyes were sharp, and his body flashed and caught her, and at the same time, he immediately used his divine ability to imprison her. Yan Qingyi wanted to struggle, but the damage she received from this attack was quite heavy, and there was no way to resist, and could only let Tang Zheng imprison her. Her face was pale as she looked at Tang Zheng, who was close by, and weakly said, "You are bringing this world to destruction, do you know that?" Tang Zheng was unmoved, and calmly said, "I only know that if you open the space door, and let the people from the sky beyond heaven come to our world, then it will truly lead to the destruction of the world." No. Yan Qingyi stubbornly shook her head. "I will destroy the sky beyond heaven, and not give them a chance to take advantage." Tang Zheng heard this, and could not help but laugh, and said jokingly, "You can't even beat me, and you still have the confidence to destroy the sky beyond heaven? I also don't know where your confidence comes from. Maybe it's because you don't understand the sky beyond heaven at all, and only heard rumors, so you don't know the power of the sky beyond heaven, and think that you can destroy a world with your own strength. Do you think you are a god? Tang Zhang's series of questions made Yan Qingyi speechless, but from her reaction, it could be seen that she was not convinced at all. Tang Zhang did not care about this, and asked curiously, "What did you do when you disappeared? Why do you know the space law?" This was the question Tang Zhang was most concerned about. Ever since returning from the sky beyond heaven, Yan Qingyi seemed incomparably mysterious, and her every move was puzzling. In particular, her actions just now deeply shocked Tang Zhang, and even though the battle had ended, Tang Zhang's mood did not calm down. Yan Qingyi turned her head, and completely ignored him. Tang Zhang rolled his eyes, but there was nothing he could do. He could not really do anything to her, after all, other than being a member of the Yan family. She also had the Emperor of Heaven in her body. "Tell the Emperor of Heaven to come out, I have something to talk to him about. His daughter has been taken away." Tang Zhang changed the topic and said, "The Emperor of Heaven, you can't even see." Yan Qingyi said confidently, but before she could finish, she stopped, and her face suddenly changed, and a dignified voice came out from her mouth. "My daughter was taken away by who?" To read the latest novel, please visit the website. Chapter 1447. Who took my daughter? Hearing this voice, Tang Zhang's expression froze. This was clearly the voice and tone of the Emperor of Heaven. It seemed like his plan had succeeded. He had just thrown out the news of the Empyrean fairy's capture in hopes of waking up the Emperor of Heaven. Although he didn't know what the relationship between Yan Qingyi and the Emperor of Heaven was, but now that Yan Qingyi was injured and imprisoned, she was at her weakest state. If she was stimulated by this news, the Emperor of Heaven might be awakened. He made the right bet and stared at Yan Qingyi with a burning gaze. At this moment, Yan Qingyi's aura changed greatly. She had become another person, the Emperor of Heaven. The Emperor of Heaven asked, "Who took my daughter? Who has the guts?" His aura was fierce and he couldn't hide his anger. Tang Zhang let out a long sigh and said regretfully, "She was taken away by Qiyu." "Qiyu?" The Emperor of Heaven turned pale with fright. "Is it that Qiyu from the ancient era?" "Yes. He's actually still alive." The Emperor of Heaven was a figure after Qiyu, so he naturally heard of Qiyu's great name. Although he knew how powerful he was, he still flew into a rage. "No matter who he is, since he dared to take my daughter, he and I cannot exist under the same sky. Emperor of Heaven, don't worry. Qiyu took her to force you to appear and subdue you." Tang Zhang was well aware of Qiyu's plan and directly pointed it out. The Emperor of Heaven stared blankly for a moment before laughing wildly. "How laughable. He actually wants me to serve him. What a daydream." Tang Zhang had already guessed the Emperor of Heaven's reaction and said, "Qiyu's wild ambition, we naturally can't let him succeed. Not only do we have to save the Empyrean fairy, but we also have to ruthlessly attack Qiyu." The Emperor of Heaven's eyes flashed with sparks as he said fiercely, "I want to kill him." The Empyrean fairy was his reverse scale. If anyone dared to harm the Empyrean fairy, he would definitely give them the heaviest revenge. "Where is Qiyu?" the Emperor of Heaven asked. Tang Zhang looked at Li Xiaotian. Li Xiaotian nodded and said, "We already have a rough location." Qiyu's whereabouts were not that easy to investigate. This was the result of the Li Palace's painstaking investigation. "Where?" the Emperor of Heaven asked. Li Xiaotian did not answer. Instead, he looked inquiringly at Tang Zhang. The Emperor of Heaven saw that he had been ignored and was filled with anger, but he had nowhere to vent it. Tang Zhang understood the Emperor of Heaven's feelings and calmly advised, "Emperor of Heaven, calm down. The Empyrean fairy is not only your daughter, but also my friend. I will do my best to save her. With me here, there's nothing for you to do." The Emperor of Heaven did not appreciate it at all. "This is our family's matter. You are not a member of my family and have no right to interfere." Tang Zhang was not angry. These words were mixed with a lot of personal emotions. Back then, the Emperor of Heaven had tried to matchmake Tang Zhang and the Empyrean fairy, but Tang Zheng had flatly refused. This made the Emperor of Heaven very angry. Tang Zheng had inherited the Heavenly Book's legacy, but he did not marry the Empyrean fairy. In the eyes of the Emperor of Heaven, this was already abnormal. If it was in the past, Tang Zheng would definitely not have gotten away with it. Now, the two of them could live in harmony. This could already be considered the Emperor of Heaven's great benevolence. How could Tang Zheng stay out of this matter? The Empyrean fairy had helped him too much. The relationship between the two of them had long been extraordinary. Naturally, he would not sit idly by and do nothing. Hurry up and tell me, where the hell is Qiyu? The Emperor of Heaven impatiently asked Li Xiaotian. Li Xiaotian still did not say a word. The Emperor of Heaven was about to go berserk. Tang Zheng quickly took over the conversation and said, "We'll go with you. We'll go find Qiyu immediately." The Emperor of Heaven looked at Tang Zheng like lightning. Tang Zheng's expression was the same as usual. He did not compromise at all. In the end, the Emperor of Heaven had no choice but to compromise. Okay, then let's go. Although the Emperor of Heaven's strength was unpredictable, Tang Zheng was not the same as before. He also had Xiao Bai and Li Xiaotian to help him. He was not afraid of the Emperor of Heaven. Tang Zheng and the other two returned to the somersault cloud together. The Emperor of Heaven did not go up. Instead, he flew on his own and kept pace with the somersault cloud. Whoosh whoosh. Both parties drew two trails in the air and disappeared into the horizon. Only the huge five-fingered mark was left as a witness to the great battle. Qiyu was furious. Someone actually came to provoke him. He had already lost several subordinates. This person's background was not small. The most important thing was that he did not even know who the enemy was. That brat Tang Zheng is dead. Who else dares to be so blind as to come here and die? Qiyu was furious. Suddenly, a person flew in hurriedly and shouted in panic, "Report, the enemy is here again." Damn it. Qiyu heavily punched down, hitting the armrest of the chair. The chair immediately cracked inch by inch, like a spider web, and collapsed. Qiyu flew up lightly, looking down at his unsettled subordinate from above. He said, "This time, I will definitely make him unable to return. I want to see who it is." With that said, Qiyu had already disappeared from the hall. In the next second, he appeared in the blue sky. A mysterious force descended from the sky, enveloping the surrounding land. Qiyu's pupils constricted, and said, "This again, humph, you actually dare to set up an inescapable net for me, break for me." A sword flew out and soared into the sky. Sword light filled the sky, illuminating this part of the world. War Soul Sword. The War Soul Sword let out a high-pitched sword cry, as if it wanted to drink blood. Rays of red light appeared on the sword's body, as if it was fresh blood. The War Soul Sword rushed into the sky, and the blue sky seemed to be pierced by this sword. Puff! The War Soul Sword stopped, and a mysterious force enveloped the sky, blocking the War Soul Sword. A strong airflow immediately appeared around the War Soul Sword. This was the side effect of the collision between the War Soul Sword and the mysterious force. This was the first time Qiyu had exchanged blows with an opponent, and he could not help but feel a chill in his heart. This probing attack had indeed found a result. His opponent was unfathomable. He was very clear about the power of the War Soul Sword, but it did not break the opponent's sacred art in an instant. This really did not make sense. After all, he really could not think of any other expert in this world who could contend against him. "I don't believe that I, Qiyu, will be afraid of your little tricks. I, Qiyu, have seen all kinds of powerful experts." War Soul Sword, charge. The War Soul Sword soared Qi sword, and with a pu sound, it pierced through the invisible binding force and finally soared into the sky. Then, with a flash, it returned to Qiyu's hands. Qiyu held on to the War Soul Sword, his heartstrings trembling. Only he knew how difficult this attack was. However, he was still calm and composed as he mocked, "Who are you? Hiding your head and showing your tail, you're just a dog." Dog? Humph, that's you talking about yourself. You don't dare to fight me head-on, but you specifically deal with my subordinates. You're the real dog who hides his head and shows his tail. A loud and clear voice came from the sky, spreading to every corner. Everyone could hear it clearly. Ji Wuxiang. Qi Yu immediately recognized the voice. After all, he had stayed in Tang Zheng's body for so long, and under the influence of his surroundings, he was naturally no stranger to Ji Wuxiang's voice. For the latest novel updates, please visit the website. Chapter 1448. Ji Wuxiang saw that Qi Yu recognized his voice and was not surprised. He said with killing intent, "It's me." Qi Yu said disdainfully, "I was wondering who it was. So it's just a small martial artist seeking death. Today, I'll fulfill your wish. Kill me? Humph, let's see who dies first." Ji Wuxiang didn't explain too much. As soon as he finished speaking, he launched an endless barrage of attacks like a tide. The power of the stars was mighty and mighty, descending from the sky. Although it was broad daylight, the sky was still flickering with the light of the stars. It was as if there were many eyes in the sky, flickering and watching everything on the ground. "Heavenly chess, attack!" Ji Wuxiang roared. From all directions, there was no hole that could not be penetrated. One attack after another arrived above Qi Yu's head. Qi Yu immediately sensed this attack. His expression was cold as he felt it very deeply. However, he did not receive any substantial damage. But the other 9 Li tribesmen were not so lucky. They were pressed down by the mighty power of the stars and were unable to stand upright. Qi Yu took a deep breath. Only then did he understand the power of this so-called heavenly chess. Back then when he was in Tang Zheng's body, he had experienced the heavenly chess. However, with his arrogant nature, he did not put this so-called heavenly chess in his eyes. Now it seemed that he had underestimated the heavenly chess and also underestimated Ji Wuxiang. Immediately, Qi Yu's heart became serious. His gaze was like lightning as he stared at Ji Wuxiang. The War Soul sword in his hand burned brightly. With a low roar, the War Soul sword split into 9 and transformed into 9 sword lights that flew into the sky. Although he did not see any trace of Ji Wuxiang, he believed that the other party must be at a certain location. Qi Yu used his own unique skill, 9 Shaman Sword Technique. The War Soul sword split into 9. 9 sword lights seemed too little, but their speed was extremely fast. In a blink of an eye, the entire sky was swept by this sword light. Puff puff puff, the air was completely pierced by the sword light. The blue sky became riddled with holes, which was extremely terrifying. Under the blue sky, there was no place to hide. Finally, when the sword light flew past a place, the air fluctuated violently. The air surged in all directions, and a figure finally appeared. Ji Wuxiang. Qi Yu immediately locked onto this figure and blurted out his name. "You've finally shown yourself. Let's see where you can hide now." Qi Yu excitedly activated his magic, and 9 sword lights flew towards Ji Wuxiang from all directions. They were like a hot knife through butter, with the power of ghosts and gods. Ji Wuxiang looked at the War Soul sword that was about to arrive in the blink of an eye. His eyes seemed to flash with lightning as he muttered something and raised both of his hands into the air. Crack! A thunderclap resounded through the clouds and shook the earth. A huge amount of star power immediately fell from the sky and gathered in his hand. Although this power was invisible, Qi Yu immediately sensed it. He did not retreat in the slightest. Instead, he used all his strength to activate the 9 Shaman Sword Technique. A stream of blood flew from his fingertip and landed on the War Soul sword. The War Soul sword shone with a red light and flew out of his hand. It merged with the 9 sword lights and transformed into an incomparably huge sword that traversed the heaven and earth. The heaven and earth seemed to be completely occupied by this sword light. Everything in sight was this huge sword. This vast and mighty aura was invincible, as if it could not be blocked at all. Ji Wuxiang's pupils shrank as his heart trembled. Qi Yu was indeed Qi Yu. Although it was tens of thousands of years later, his strength was still extremely terrifying. However, he was not frightened. After he waved the star power in his hand, a sharp sound that seemed to be able to shatter everything flew towards the huge sword that traversed the heaven and earth with an unstoppable momentum. Boom! Collision, loud sound. In the next second, there was no sound. Everything was silent. Actually, this was just an illusion. Because the sound was too loud, it caused people to temporarily lose their hearing. That was why they felt that there was no sound. But as far as his eyes could see, he could see everything clearly. After the two sides collided, the star power suffered from the recoil and scattered in all directions, forming a powerful shockwave. The mountain peak was instantly destroyed. The towering trees were uprooted and torn into countless pieces. At the same time, the sword light of the huge sword vibrated and turned into small sword lights. Tens of thousands of sword lights swept across the sky. The sky was riddled with holes. It was as if the sky could no longer be called the sky. It was more like a piece of clothing that had countless patches on it. This mountain range was completely flattened by this attack. Countless living beings in the mountains disappeared into thin air. The people of the 9 Li tribesmen were also greatly affected. The camp that they had painstakingly built was destroyed in an instant. Some of the weaker people were even directly killed. Wails and cries of ghosts and wolves were everywhere. When Qi Yu saw this scene, the anger in his heart could be imagined. His attack that seemed to be sure to win actually ended up being evenly matched. Neither side could do anything to the other. How could this be? This was his territory. Facing someone who came to provoke him, he actually couldn't gain the upper hand. This was a great humiliation. Moreover, there were so many pairs of eyes watching. If he couldn't deliver a fatal blow to the strong enemy, it would be the greatest challenge to his dignity. You have some real skills, but this is far from enough. Qi Yu flew high up, as if he was close to the top of the sky and looked down from above. Ji Wuxiang was not to be outdone. Like a rocket, the air under his feet made a loud sound. He also rushed to Qi Yu's height and looked at him from afar. Both sides understood that this was an extremely difficult battle. Although Qi Yu said it very nicely, he didn't take Ji Wuxiang seriously. However, in fact, his chances of winning were not so high, and the situation was not so optimistic. The two sides confronted each other. Only the sound of the wind blowing could be heard. It was oppressive and terrifying. There seemed to be sparks flashing in each other's eyes. Ji Wuxiang also truly experienced Qi Yu's strength. Last time when Qi Yu escaped, he thought that Qi Yu was just a facade and not enough to be used as evidence. But from the blow just now, he was wrong. Last time, Qi Yu had held back his strength. This was his true level. And this was not Dianan. The power of the celestial chess was not fully aroused. After all, the celestial chess was already very perfect in Dianan. But in this area, it was hastily arranged by him. The power could not be compared. But Ji Wuxiang did not retreat. Instead, he said aggressively, "Qi Yu, last time I let you escape from Dianan. This time, I will not give you a second chance." Qi Yu had already accumulated his strength and was ready to launch the second round of attacks. But after hearing this sentence, his eyes showed doubt and said, "What nonsense are you talking about? When did I go to Dianan? How could I escape? You don't admit what you have done. This is not Qi Yu's style. It is also not in line with your identity." Ji Wuxiang said disdainfully. In his heart, he said that Qi Yu was such a person. It seemed that the legend was indeed wrong. Well, it doesn't matter if you don't admit it. Anyway, today I will take revenge for my men. After a pause, Ji Wuxiang continued. This made Qi Yu confused. In his heart, he thought, could it be that the other party was deliberately mystifying in order to distract his attention? But there was a problem, he wanted to get to the bottom of it. He persistently asked, "Ji Wuxiang, before we fight, let's make the problem clear. I admit that I killed your men, but when did I go to Dianan? Chi Yu's revenge plan against martial artists had already killed a lot of martial artists. Of course, Ji Wuxiang's men were among them. Therefore, Chi Yu did not deny this point. But he did not know that Ji Wuxiang was not referring to this matter at all. Ji Wuxiang saw Chi Yu deny again and again. He despised him even more and said disdainfully, "Since you admit that you killed my men, is it necessary to deny that you went to Dianan? Why is it not necessary?" Chi Yu angrily said. It took him a lot of effort to restrain his impulse to make a move. He said, "I, Chi Yu, dare to do and dare to take responsibility. The things I have done, I will not deny it. But the things I have not done, no one can pin the blame on me." What a righteous speech, but what you have done is the opposite of what you have said and done. It does not match at all. Ji Wuxiang laughed wildly in ridicule. Chi Yu's anger became more and more intense. He opened his mouth and roared like thunder, "I said that I have not been to Dianan, and I have not been there." Chi Yu's face was ferocious. His eyes emitted an ominous light, making people shudder. It was precisely this action that made Ji Wuxiang's heart startled. Ji Wuxiang's intelligence was rarely matched by anyone. Although he was full of anger and hatred, he was not completely blinded. From Chi Yu's reaction, he saw some clues. Could there be some inside story? He calmed down his anger and asked, "Chi Yu, let me ask you, have you really not been to Dianan some time ago? Dianan is not a good place. What would I do there?" Chi Yu said disdainfully. Chi Yu's contempt was not disguised. On the contrary, it was very realistic and revealed his nature. Ji Wuxiang immediately understood this point. His heart moved and he seemed to realize something. He quickly asked, "Then where are you?" "Of course I am here. I have always been here." Chi Yu pointed to the ground that had been razed to the ground and said coldly. Ji Wuxiang stared at Chi Yu, not letting go of the slightest change. In the end, he determined that Chi Yu was indeed not lying. Moreover, at this point, Chi Yu really did not need to lie. Ji Wuxiang's heart seemed to flash with lightning. He was shocked and said, "Chi Yu, you have not been to Dianan and have not fought with me, right?" "Of course." Chi Yu looked at Ji Wuxiang as if he was a madman. "Why would I fight with you? Who do you think you are?" This was Chi Yu's previous mentality. He did not put Ji Wuxiang in his eyes at all. Naturally, he disdained to fight with him. But at this moment, his mentality had changed. After Tang Zhang's death, Chi Yu admitted that no one in the world could threaten him. But now he had changed his mind. There was still Ji Wuxiang who could threaten him. Ji Wuxiang was not angered by Chi Yu's disdainful words. Instead, he was furious. He was fooled and kept in the dark. He was used as a gun to deal with Chi Yu. Ji Wuxiang, who thought he was proud and smart, was fooled like this. This made him angrier than Chi Yu killing his men. To read the latest novel, please visit the website. Chapter 1449. The anger in Ji Wuxiang's chest burned as if it was going to jump out of his pores. The voice in his heart roared, "Who is deceiving me like this and using me as a tool?" There was no answer. At least, with his intelligence system, he did not know the answer. But there was no doubt that this was a huge provocation to him. He absolutely could not tolerate it or sit idly by. He had to uncover the mastermind behind the scenes and make him beg for his life, but he couldn't die. Chi Yu looked at Ji Wuxiang's face, which seemed to have changed, and immediately realized the problem. He narrowed his eyes and asked curiously, "Did you find any clues?" Ji Wuxiang slowly raised his head. His eyes were gloomy and terrible. He said in a deep voice, "We have all been set up." "What, set up?" Chi Yu turned pale with fright. He did not understand what this meant. Ji Wuxiang saw Chi Yu's confusion and explained, "Someone disguised as you and went to Dianan to kill my people. He also fought with me, but he escaped." This sentence was simple and clear. Chi Yu immediately understood the cause and effect. It turned out that there was such a thing. No wonder Ji Wuxiang was so angry. The most important thing was, who was so bold as to disguise himself as him and frame him? Ji Wuxiang was shocked. If that person was not Chi Yu, but someone else, then this person's strength was really unfathomable. Because this person could not only transform into Chi Yu, but also the most important thing was that this person's fighting power could compete with Ji Wuxiang and even escape from him. Apart from Chi Yu, when did such a powerful person appear in the world? Who do you think this person is? Ji Wuxiang asked. Chi Yu's eyes kept changing, and his mind was full of thoughts. A bright light flashed in his mind, like lightning across the dark night sky, making people's eyes light up. He blurted out a name, 100 Faces Star Lord. Tang Zheng was dead. If there was anyone in the world who could transform into Chi Yu and have the strength to compete with Ji Wuxiang, then only 100 Faces Star Lord was possible. After all, 100 Faces Star Lord had been disappearing, which was not in line with his style. He would certainly not be silent. He would definitely wait for an opportunity to make a move and stir up trouble. Framing and killing with a borrowed knife, this was clearly the best strategy. It was indeed 100 Faces Star Lord's style. He liked to play with others in the palm of his hand, like playing with puppets. Ji Wuxiang immediately recalled this person. It wasn't that he hadn't come into contact with the 100 Transformations Star Lord before, and he had even fought with him before. Moreover, the return of the devil race was facilitated by the 100 Transformations Star Sovereign, which showed how daring he was. Instigating a fight between Chi Yu and Ji Wuxiang was indeed the style of Celestial Lord of 100 Faces. It's actually him. Didn't he disappear without a trace? Instead of hiding properly, he dares to come out and stir up trouble. He really doesn't know how to write the word death. Ji Wuxiang gnashed his teeth, unable to hide his anger. Chi Yu and 100 Faces Star Lord were from the same generation, so he understood him better. Back then, he dared to crash into Mount Buzhou, showing just how daring of a madman he was. Moreover, 100 Faces Star Lord had worked so hard to make the demons return because he wanted to take them for his own use. In the end, all of this was intercepted by Chi Yu. 100 Faces Star Lord's efforts were all for naught, so it was easy to imagine how angry he would be. He would definitely take revenge. This matter was definitely 100 Faces Star Lord's revenge. Chi Yu immediately filled in the details, completely believing that this was 100 Faces Star Lord's scheme. The pitiful 100 Faces Star Lord would never have dreamed that he would be implicated. If he knew the truth, he would probably fly into a rage and spit out 3 liters of blood. Tang Zheng would definitely not have thought that his plan would have such an unexpected effect, leading the flames of war to 100 Faces Star Lord. Where is 100 Faces Star Lord now? Chi Yu asked hatefully. He knew that Ji Wuxiang's intelligence work was very good, otherwise, he would not have found his hiding place. Although Ji Wuxiang did not think that 100 Faces Star Lord was the one who did it, he had always been in 100 Faces Star Lord's mind and had always ordered people to investigate his whereabouts. Therefore, maybe his subordinates would really find clues and find 100 Faces Star Lord's whereabouts. Even if he digs 3 feet into the ground, I have a way to dig him out. Ji Wuxiang said confidently. Chi Yu sneered, don't be too full of yourself. The key is to find 100 Faces Star Lord first. 100 Faces Star Lord is not an ordinary person. He is extremely cunning. If he dares to do such a daring thing, he must have thought of a way out. So what if he has a way out? I want to turn his way out into a dead end. Ji Wuxiang was unmoved and said with a murderous aura. Good. Chi Yu's eyes lit up and said with the same enemy, I want to turn all of 100 Faces Star Lord's ways into dead ends, so that he has no way out. Although the two were still in a life and death battle a moment ago, they reached a tacit consensus in this second. Both sides were still wary of each other and could not wait to get rid of each other. But regarding the matter of 100 Faces Star Lord, both of them could no longer tolerate 100 Faces Star Lord living in this world. They had to kill him. Ji Wuxiang looked deeply at Chi Yu and his heart moved. If he returned to Dianan and started to investigate Hundred Faces Star-Lord's movements, he would definitely gain something. However, although he had the confidence to deal with Hundred Faces Star-Lord alone, Hundred Faces Star-Lord was not an ordinary person. Through the last battle, Ji Wuxiang had already determined this point. Therefore, if he had Qi Yu as a helper, there might be unexpected benefits. At the very least, he could divert Hundred Faces Star-Lord's attention, so that he would have a better chance to deal a fatal blow to Hundred Faces Star-Lord. The two of them hit it off, and Ji Wuxiang did not delay any longer. He immediately dialed Dianan's number and asked Yi Xuanji to track down Hundred Faces Star-Lord's whereabouts. Not long after, Yi Xuanji's call came, and there was indeed a clue. Although Hundred Faces Star-Lord's whereabouts never appeared again, there was one person who exposed her whereabouts, and that was Junko. This woman who followed Hundred Faces Star-Lord wholeheartedly was almost like Hundred Faces Star-Lord's shadow. As long as Junko was somewhere, Hundred Faces Star-Lord would definitely not be too far away. When Ji Wuxiang heard this news, he immediately became excited. His intelligence system was not to be trifled with. Such important news was known in such a short time. As for the place where Junko exposed her whereabouts, there was also news, and that was the capital. Junko exposed her whereabouts in the capital, so Hundred Faces Star-Lord must also be in the capital. The two of them involuntarily looked at each other, staring into each other's eyes, and immediately understood each other's thoughts. Go to the capital. The two of them also shouted in unison, expressing the determination in their hearts. The capital was not an ordinary place. It could be said to be a dragon's pool and a tiger's den, but in the eyes of the two of them, the capital was like their own backyard, coming and going as they pleased. A moment ago, they were still looking like they would not give up until they killed each other, but now they were facing the same enemy. The two of them looked at each other awkwardly, hiding it very well. In fact, they were very clear about each other's thoughts. If they killed Hundred Faces Star-Lord, perhaps the two of them would return to a life and death situation. If they did not kill each other, they would definitely not feel at ease. After all, from the battle just now, both of them were very clear that the other was their lifelong enemy. If there was you, there would be no me, and if there was me, there would be no you. In the future, there would only be one of them in this world, the only supreme expert. At this moment, the compromise was just the calm before the storm. Qi Yu flew down and arranged the people. This place had been razed to the ground, and there was no way to continue to stay, so they had to find another place. The people gathered around, staring at him with burning eyes, waiting for his orders. The impact of the battle just now was too great, and many people's beliefs were even shaken. It turned out that Qi Yu was not the invincible person in this world, and there were still people who could compete with him. Qi Yu's eyes swept across the crowd like lightning, understanding their eyes and reading their thoughts. His eyes were awe-inspiring, full of majesty, and with an unquestionable tone, he said, "For the time being, you all retreat to our other secret stronghold, and in addition, you must look after this person for me." Looking in the direction of Qi Yu's finger, everyone's eyes fell on Empyrean Fairy. She was not injured in the earth-shattering battle just now, because there were people guarding her and saving her in time. The Empyrean Fairy looked up at Ji Wuxiang, then at Qi Yu and said, "Qi Yu, with such a powerful opponent, your good days are over." Qi Yu glanced at Ji Wuxiang from the corner of his eye and snorted, "Empyrean Fairy, don't be so complacent. If your father doesn't come to save you, then your existence is worthless." The Empyrean Fairy was unmoved, and said fearlessly, "Then hurry up and kill me." In the air, Ji Wuxiang's eyes were like an eagle's as they locked onto the Empyrean Fairy, and he exclaimed inwardly, "It's actually her." He was no stranger to the Empyrean Fairy. She had spoiled his plans time and time again, and he wanted nothing more than to get rid of her directly. Unfortunately, the Empyrean Fairy was not an ordinary person, and it would not be so easy to get rid of her. Tang Zheng is already dead, she is no more than a rootless duckweed. She is no longer important. Ji Wuxiang did not place the Empyrean Fairy in his eyes, so he did not act blindly without thinking. Qi Yu gave his subordinate some more detailed instructions, and then parted ways, flying back to the capital with Ji Wuxiang. The next day, a white cloud floated over this messy plain, and there was a figure flying side by side with it. The white cloud landed on the ground, and Tang Zheng and the others jumped down. Just like the Emperor of Heaven, they stared at the ground in shock. What's going on? Li Xiaotian was the first to cry out in alarm. The intelligence had indicated that Qi Yu's camp was in this area, and they originally thought that it would take a bit of effort to find the exact location. Who would have thought that what greeted their eyes was this messy plain? Tang Zheng and the Emperor of Heaven both frowned at the same time, because they could feel traces of energy fluctuations coming from this piece of land. An extremely intense battle took place here. Tang Zheng was the first to speak. The Emperor of Heaven nodded in agreement. It was a battle between experts. If the Emperor of Heaven called someone an expert, then they were definitely peak-level experts. Tang Zheng's head moved, and he immediately thought of two people, blurting out, it was Qi Yu and Ji Wuxiang. Chapter 1450. Tang Zheng bluntly pointed out that this was the result of the battle between Qi Yu and Ji Wuxiang. The Emperor of Heaven was astonished, but he did not delve into it. Instead, he asked, then what about my daughter? This was the question he was most concerned about. Tang Zheng wrinkled his brow. He had no idea what the outcome of the battle was, and as for the whereabouts of the Empyrean fairy, he was even more clueless. He regretfully shook his head and said, I'm afraid we'll have to continue investigating. Heaven and earth flew into a rage. How can that be? If something were to happen to my daughter, would you be able to take responsibility? Tang Zheng helplessly rolled his eyes and said, I can't take responsibility. Her life is too important, and no one can take responsibility. But we will definitely find her. The Emperor of Heaven angrily wanted to retort, but Li Xiaotian had a bright idea and interrupted, don't be anxious. Perhaps I have a way. What method do you have? The Emperor of Heaven suddenly froze and stared at her with shining eyes. The Emperor of Heaven simply did not place Li Xiaotian in his heart, so he truly could not understand what method she had. Li Xiaotian confidently said, such a large battle will definitely attract the attention of many people. I've already sent disciples of the Li Palace to investigate, so they'll definitely have some clues. Really? The Emperor of Heaven anxiously asked, doubt appearing in his eyes. Li Xiaotian did not answer him, but instead looked at Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng understood and nodded. Call the disciples of the Li Palace over. Li Xiaotian's lips curled into a beautiful arc. She raised her neck and a melodious voice came from her throat. This was the signal of the Li Palace. The voice traveled far, and not long after, a similar voice came from the distance, as if responding to her. A few silhouettes emerged from the distance and rushed out like a gust of wind, directly arriving in front of these people. Palace Master. The few of them took the initiative to bow to Tang Zheng respectfully. They looked very excited, obviously not expecting to see the Palace Master. Thank you for your hard work. Tang Zheng said amiably. It's no trouble at all. It's our honor to serve the Palace Master. Several people hurriedly lowered their heads and said respectfully. You were nearby just now. Did you find anything? What exactly happened? Tang Zheng asked directly. They immediately repeated what they had seen and heard in detail. The great battle just now had given them too much of a shock, and now that they recalled it, they still had lingering fears. When the others heard the details of the battle, they were shocked by Ji Wuxiang and Qi Yu's profound power and powerful fighting strength. Although they were too far away to hear the conversation between Ji Wuxiang and Qi Yu, Tang Zheng had already guessed something from their behavior. In the end, the two had not been able to reach a conclusion, but had instead reached a temporary compromise. This meant that they had definitely seen through Tang Zheng's plan to sow discord. They don't know that you're still alive, but they're heading toward the capital. What are they going to do? The Li Palace inwardly muttered, truly unable to see through their thoughts. Tang Zheng was suspicious. Even after racking his brains, he still couldn't figure out the whole story. Qi Yu and Ji Wuxiang couldn't guess that this was his plan, so they naturally wouldn't put this debt on the heads of the people around him. Could it be that they put this debt on the heads of other people? Li Xiaotian had a sudden inspiration as he pondered. Tang Zheng's eyes brightened. It's extremely possible. Then whose head will it be? They're going to the capital. In the capital, besides us, who else has the greatest power? Tang Zheng pensively asked. Chief. Li Xiaotian blurted out. Tang Zheng smiled and nodded. The chief's power was extremely strong and would definitely not sit by and watch these two grow stronger step by step. Thus, it really was possible that he had plotted to have them kill each other. Then what do we do? Li Xiaotian asked. Tang Zheng considered for a moment, then said, Chief is not an ordinary person, and his current strength is definitely incomparable to the past. Then let them fight. Immediately tell the family to be more careful and pay close attention to the movements in the capital. Don't invite trouble to yourself. They simply didn't know that the chief had long ago been transformed by the 100 Changes Star Lord. It was just that by a freak combination of factors, Qi Yu and Ji Wuxiang really did target the chief they spoke of. I don't care about other people. I only care about my daughter's safety. Where is she? The Emperor of Heaven impatiently interrupted the conversation. Where is the Empyrean fairy's whereabouts? Tang Zheng knew that the Emperor of Heaven was anxious, so he asked the Li Palace disciples. The Li Palace disciples had always been searching for the Empyrean fairy's whereabouts. Naturally, they wouldn't just watch as the Empyrean fairy disappeared right under their noses. Our people have already followed them. They've set up camp in a place. The Empyrean fairy is among them. Hearing about his daughter's whereabouts, the Emperor of Heaven became excited and impatiently asked, Then where is she? Tang Zheng took over and said, You guys lead us to find her. Yes. The few of them climbed onto the somersault cloud and chased after the Jiuli tribe. Although the Jiuli tribe had already left for nearly a day and were very far away, the somersault cloud was extremely fast. It didn't take long for the somersault cloud to catch up to them and float above their heads. Looking down from the sky, they could already see that the Jiuli tribe had set up camp. There were many Jiuli tribe members. These were all demons who had returned from the sky beyond heaven. Although they had suffered many casualties in the past few battles, they were still a huge force. The original leader of the demons, Saint King, had already been killed by Mo Xie. Now that Qiyu had left, they were like a group of dragons without a leader. They didn't have any powerful experts. Qiyu didn't think that there would be someone who would dare to sneak into his headquarters. It was like the mantis stalking the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. The somersault cloud silently landed nearby. The few of them jumped off the somersault cloud. The Emperor of Heaven's eyes narrowed as he stared at the Jiuli tribe's camp. After a moment, he disdainfully said, You want to stop me with this insignificant defensive array? It turned out that the Jiuli tribe had already secretly set up a defensive array to prevent enemies from invading. It was a pity that this array could only defend against ordinary enemies. It was child's play in front of these experts. The Emperor of Heaven walked towards the camp on his own. From under his feet, spots of light spread out and rose into the air. The originally invisible defensive array immediately became visible. A wall blocked in front of everyone. It was covered with spots of light. Kacha. This light seemed to have a mysterious power. It disintegrated the invisible wall, causing it to collapse immediately. The few of them passed through the defensive array as if there was no one there. They went straight to the center of the camp. Because the other party had a hostage. Originally, the Emperor of Heaven had planned to attack by force. However, Tang Zheng persuaded him not to. In order to prevent any accidents from happening to the Empyrean fairy, it was better to sneak in and find the Empyrean fairy first. The camp was very orderly. One couldn't help but sigh at the fact that the Jiuli tribe were not ordinary people. After all, they had experienced inhumane experiences in the realm beyond heaven. They had been beaten to a pulp by the people of the realm beyond heaven on more than one occasion, and had no choice but to find another place to set up camp. As such, they had long since mastered this ability. In the center of the camp, there was a large tent. Everyone locked onto this large tent and went straight in. When the few of them entered the large tent, they didn't even see a shadow of the Empyrean fairy, let alone a trace of the Empyrean fairy. Right at this moment, a wave of battle cries rang out from outside the large tent. Chapter 1451. The battle cries filled the sky, shocking several people. They looked at each other in dismay. Could it be that the enemy had already predicted their movements and came to catch them like turtles in a jar? It was a pity that these people were not turtles but flood dragons. They were not easy to catch. Let's go take a look. Tang Jing took the lead and rushed out of the large tent. The outside was already covered in fog and they could not see the enemy clearly. They could only hear battle cries coming from the fog. You dare to barge into the Nine Li tribe's camp. You don't know how the word death is written. Tang Zheng had already changed his appearance to prevent the other party from recognizing him and then informing Qiyu. Now that Qiyu and Ji Wuxiang did not think that he was the culprit, he naturally would not expose himself. The Emperor of Heaven's eyes were like torches as he fiercely stared at the fog and said, "A group of scoundrels, hiding their heads but showing their tails. Quickly hand over my daughter." Hearing such a young woman say such words with such an imposing aura, the Nine Li tribe people could not help but be shocked. However, they were cultivators after all and had seen many strange things. In the next second, they were not surprised and fiercely said, "A group of madmen, actually daring to come to the Nine Li tribe and ask for her. Let's kill them first." So. Several rays of light shot out from the fog and were abnormally dangerous. The Emperor of Heaven took a large step forward and casually waved his hand. A gust of wind blew past and these dangerous rays of light disappeared without a trace. The Emperor of Heaven went to the edge of the fog and reached out with his hand. A large piece of the fog was torn off and a large gap appeared. Several people flew out from behind the fog. The Emperor of Heaven's 5 fingers closed together and fiercely squeezed. Pang, pang, pang. In the midst of the explosion, several people exploded into pieces. This smooth and ruthless move shocked the Nine Li tribe people and made them realize how strong the enemy was. However, they did not retreat. Only a moment of silence came from the fog. It was so silent that it gave people a formless pressure. Tang Jing suddenly had an idea and said, "They're setting up a formation." From Mo Xia, he had obtained a lot of knowledge about refining artifacts. Among them, there were also a lot of knowledge about formations. In terms of formations, he had gained a deeper understanding. Therefore, he immediately noticed the abnormality. As expected, they are setting up a formation. The Emperor of Heaven looked deeply at Tang Zhang and also sensed the Nine Li tribe's intentions. But in his heart, he was extremely surprised. Tang Zhang's attainment in martial arts was so profound, it was a world of difference from last time. He must have had a fortuitous encounter during this period of time. I'll break the formation. Xiao Bai was eager to make a move. He took the lead and rushed out. Boom! He spat out a ball of flame from his mouth. The flame quickly grew and exploded in the air, turning into small fireballs that flew into the fog. Whoosh! Whoosh! Rays of light flew out from the fog and intertwined to form a mysterious pattern in the air. A mysterious power surged out and quickly intercepted the fireball. However, the power of the fireball was too great. It immediately destroyed the barrier of the mysterious power and fell from the sky. Boom! 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 It sounded like cannonballs hitting the ground. Sparks flew everywhere and screams immediately rang out. Many gaps appeared in the fog. The Nine Li tribe finally exposed their whereabouts. Xiao Bai jumped up and landed in the gap. With a wave of his hand, his fingernails were as sharp as knives and quickly reaped the lives of the people. The enemy's formation was already in chaos. There was nothing to worry about. Tang Zhang and the rest did not wait and watch. They all launched their attacks. The fog was completely stirred up and it was difficult to continue. Retreat, retreat! The Nine Li tribe shouted. With the help of the last bit of fog, they fled in all directions like stray dogs. Tang Zheng did not expect to catch all of the Nine Li tribe in one fell swoop. Seeing that they were escaping, he quickly reached out and caught one of them. The other party struggled with all his might. However, when he fell into Tang Zheng's hands, he could not escape at all. Tang Zheng did not waste any words. His 5 fingers closed together and grabbed the top of the other party's head. He used a soul-searching technique. Everything in the other party's brain surged out like a tide. Suddenly, his eyes lit up. He had captured the information that he had thought of. Ji Wuxiang and Qi Yu had seen through his scheme. It was not completely as described by the disciple of the Li Palace. There was actually an even deeper inside story. Qi Yu and Ji Wuxiang had placed this debt on the 100 Faces Star Sovereign. This was very different from what they had expected. It was a pleasant surprise. It turned out that the 100 Faces Star Sovereign was also hiding in the capital. That was why they had rushed straight to the capital. He raised his eyebrows and revealed a pleased expression. Ji Wuxiang and Qi Yu had been toyed with in the palm of his hand. This sense of accomplishment was not something that could be compared to ordinary things. There was also another point, the Empyrean fairy's whereabouts. She had not remained in the camp, but had been taken away on the way. He did not know what Qi Yu was thinking, but he had actually returned and taken her away. Perhaps he believed that she was extraordinarily important. As for the Nine Li tribe laying down a large formation and waiting for rabbits, this was also a coincidence. Since the enemy dared to scheme against Qi Yu and Ji Wuxiang, they could not rule out other methods. Qi Yu had not personally overseen the camp. Worried that the enemy would attack, he had his subordinates lay down a large formation as a precaution. He had not expected that this formation would run into Tang Zheng's group. It was just a pity that the formation was too weak in front of these people. It was simply unable to trap them. After understanding the sequence of events, Tang Zheng could not help but feel somewhat disappointed. He had originally believed that he could track down the Empyrean fairy and successfully rescue her. However, Qi Yu had interfered and taken her away. It seemed that there was no need to continue the chase. They had to quickly rush to the capital and take advantage of the fact that something had happened to the Empyrean fairy to rescue her. Seeing that the others were still chasing after the Nine Li tribe, Tang Zheng immediately shouted, "Do not chase after a cornered enemy." Everyone subconsciously stopped in their tracks and turned to look at him. The Emperor of Heaven indignantly said, "They dared to take away my daughter. I will make them die without a burial ground." Tang Zheng earnestly advised, "Emperor of Heaven, do not be anxious. I already know where the Empyrean fairy is." The Emperor of Heaven was shocked and quickly asked, "Where is she?" "The capital. In order to avoid any accidents, we must quickly go to the capital. As for these defeated generals, they are not a cause for concern. We cannot waste time on them." The Emperor of Heaven thought for a moment and immediately changed his mind. He urged, "Then what are we waiting for? Let's quickly go to the capital." It was clear that compared to his daughter's safety, these defeated generals were almost negligible. Hearing the Emperor of Heaven say this, Xiao Bai, Li Xiaotian, and the others all stopped and no longer chased after them. They all looked at Tang Zheng with shining eyes. Tang Zheng made the final decision and said, "Then we will go to the capital now." At the same time, he was also thinking that if he really encountered Qi Yu and Ji Wuxiang, the news of him faking his death would not be able to be hidden. After all, the other party was not stupid. Adding on the fact that Xiao Bai and Li Xiaotian were by his side, it would be easy for them to connect the dots. But this did not matter. As long as he could save the Empyrean fairy, he would not hesitate to expose himself. Moreover, the inner demons had been hiding in the capital. The battle of the capital would definitely involve them. After all, the inner demons had promised him to deal with Qi Yu. They would definitely not go back on their word. Chapter 1452. Dark clouds covered the capital. The clouds were frighteningly low, as if they were just above their heads and within reach. Many people had an ominous premonition as the dark clouds pressed down on the city, threatening to destroy it. Junko followed the secret route, making many turns and mysteriously walking from the outside to the imperial palace. 3 people appeared in the thick clouds. Their eyes were like lightning as they keenly discovered her whereabouts. No matter how she tried to hide, there was no way to avoid being seen by the people in the clouds. Junko didn't know that she came out this time to investigate the matter of a certain mountain being razed to the ground. Heaven didn't disappoint those who worked hard. She finally found a clue. It turned out that it was the chaotic battle between Chi Yu and Ji Wuxiang that led to such a huge result. When she saw the photos of the scene, she couldn't help but be deeply shocked. Although she had expected the power of the battle between the 2 masters was so great, she was still shocked. She immediately realized the power of these 2 masters. The strangest thing was that the 2 of them actually stopped fighting and their whereabouts were unknown. Her intuition told her that there must be some unknown mystery, so she couldn't wait to report it to her master, 100 Faces. There were 3 layers inside and 3 layers outside. It was so tight that not even a fly could get in. Not even a fly would be able to get in. Above the clouds, the 3 people looked at their target and couldn't help but frown. Chiyu said doubtfully, Junko and 100 Faces are inseparable. Why would she come to this place? Could it be that 100 Faces is hiding here? Ji Wuxiang pondered for a long time and said thoughtfully, we can't rule out this possibility. Ji Wuxiang knows the art of transformation and is the least likely to be seen through. He can completely change into another person and successfully avoid all kinds of eyes. This sentence immediately reminded Chiyu, and he said in realization, that makes sense. Look at the situation when Junko came in. No one stopped her at all. She seems to be very familiar with this place, which is extremely abnormal. One had to know that this small place was the center of power. How could an unrelated person be allowed to come in? If there was something fishy, there must be a demon. The Empyrean fairy stood at the side without saying a word. After hearing their analysis, she couldn't help but agree with them. The 100-change star sovereign was extremely cunning. If he really transformed into someone, it would be extremely difficult to find him. Only Junko's flaw could allow them to follow the clues and attack the root of the problem. Below is the center of this country's power. Although you know that the 100 Faces star sovereign may be hiding there, how are you going to find him? After all, he can transform into anyone. Are you going to search for him without any scruples? The Empyrean fairy asked jokingly. She was already restrained by Chiyu, so she couldn't use her divine arts. She couldn't influence the actions of the 2 of them, so she could only provoke them with words. If the 2 of them really dared to directly attack, it would definitely cause chaos. If he could take advantage of the chaos to escape, or attract the attention of his own people, he might have a chance to escape. Hearing the Empyrean fairy's provocation, the 2 of them looked at her deeply. Chiyu snorted and said disdainfully, why wouldn't we dare to go down? See, your provocation didn't work at all. The 2 of them had already seen through the Empyrean fairy's thoughts. The Empyrean fairy calmly accepted it. She had long since known that her little trick couldn't be hidden from them. She was fishing for those who were willing to take the bait. Obviously, the 2 of them had taken the bait. Because they had no better choice, they could only take this opportunity to find the culprit, the 100 Faces star sovereign. The 100 Faces star sovereign's actions were like stepping on the lion's head, completely angering them. They had to take revenge and give him a heavy, even fatal, blow. Go down! Chiyu shouted and rushed down from the clouds with the Empyrean fairy. Ji Wuxiang didn't want to be left behind. As fast as lightning, he pierced through the clouds like a meteor and landed directly on the courtyard house. Woo woo woo. A sharp alarm sounded, as if it wanted to tear apart the dark clouds. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. Bright lights flashed from the courtyard house and shot densely into the sky. They were so powerful that they interweaved into a fire net. Anti-air missiles. The courtyard house was indeed befitting of his status. He had actually set up such a powerful killing weapon. When the scouts saw a few people descending from the clouds, they knew that there were invaders. Then, they fired the missiles without hesitation. The missiles rose into the sky, making ear-piercing sounds as they flew toward them. They were so powerful that it was terrifying. Qi Yu and Ji Wuxiang didn't care at all. Ji Wuxiang waved his hand, and the power of the stars descended from the sky. It pierced through the layers of dark clouds and enveloped this part of the world. The capital city was originally a place where Ji Wuxiang secretly operated. It was also the birthplace of the celestial chess. Although he was forced to leave the capital city in the end, there were still some foundations of the celestial chess in the capital city. With his current cultivation and understanding of the celestial chess, he could easily mobilize the remaining power of the celestial chess. In an instant, this part of the world became a small celestial chess. He stood in the middle and was the leader. When he waved his hand, the missile's attack came to an abrupt stop. Time and space seemed to have frozen, and the missiles were completely suspended in midair. Qi Yu's pupils contracted as he stared at Ji Wuxiang's move. This move was indeed very beautiful and extremely shocking. Qi Yu's expression was grave as he said, "So what if it's the celestial chess?" With a thought, the sword light flew out from his hand. It was like a stone thrown into a calm lake. Everything that had been frozen immediately became lively. The sword light broke the restraints of the celestial chess. However, all the missiles had been exhausted and lost their momentum. They fell from the sky like raindrops. The missiles that were originally a threat to the enemy immediately became a threat to themselves. Those missiles fell directly toward the courtyard house. Cries of alarm immediately came from below. Clearly, no one had expected this. Looking at the missiles falling from the sky, despair almost spontaneously rose. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Another series of high-tech artillery shells rose from the courtyard house. They interweaved into a firepower net and intercepted the missiles falling from the sky. Boom, boom, boom. The sound of the explosion was deafening. The powerful shock wave tore through the dark clouds in the sky. A huge hole opened up like a giant mouth, mocking others. The power of the shock wave was not limited to this. The courtyard house below also suffered. Although it was not directly hit by the missiles, the rows of tall trees and blooming flowers were immediately cut in half. Many roofs were even directly blasted off. However, the only exception was the roof. It was undamaged, like a safe island in the storm. It was impossible to shake it at all. Everyone's gaze fell on this house. It became the most eye-catching symbol. Since this house was so sturdy and different from the others, the person living in it must be the most important person. To read the latest novel, please visit Chapter 1453. Qi Yu, Ji Wuxiang, and Empyrean Fairy all stared at the house. The identity of the person living in it was obvious, the person with the most authority. However, such a fierce attack did not make 100 Faces appear. This was out of their expectations. Could it be that 100 Faces was in this house? Had he become the leader's subordinate? This was highly possible. If the snake did not come out of its hole, then there was no need to lure it out. They could just destroy the hole. Qi Yu and Ji Wuxiang looked at each other and dove down. There were no more missiles, but they were replaced by figures that soared into the sky. They were not weaker than the missiles at all. This is getting interesting. Seeing that someone was charging at him directly, Qi Yu's lips curled up in excitement. It would be boring if there were no enemies. These people are strange. Ji Wuxiang was the first to notice something and said in surprise. Indeed, they don't have any vitality. They are not living people. Qi Yu could tell that these people were just machines and not living people. Mechanical warriors. Ji Wuxiang immediately remembered the mechanical warriors mentioned in his intelligence. Without a doubt, these people were mechanical warriors. They were just a group of mechanical warriors. There was no way they could be compared to real experts. This was what the two of them thought. Therefore, they did not care at all. Sword light and astral powers moved together, but the mechanical warriors reacted very quickly as well. With a flash of light, many laser beams shot out from their eyes, heading straight for the few of them. The temperature of the aurora was extremely high. The air was already burning and crackling. When it collided with the sword light, intense sparks were created. At the same time, the invisible astral power was also blocked by the laser light. A huge hole was torn in the air, and the momentum was terrifying. Qi Yu and Ji Wuxiang's eyes lit up as they clicked their tongues and said, "Interesting, this iron lump is really not simple." They did not know that after 100 Faces came to power, he gathered all his power and accelerated the research and improvement of the mechanical warriors. The current mechanical warriors were completely different. Their battle prowess had increased tremendously. A lump of iron is still a lump of iron. What use is it? Just be destroyed. Qi Yu snorted in disdain. The war soul sword in his hand shone brightly like a bright sun. Even the black clouds in the sky were illuminated by the sword light. Puff! Wherever the sword light passed by, the mechanical warriors would break into two with a kacha sound, and the laser beam stopped abruptly. Ji Wuxiang extended his slender finger and pointed in the direction of the void. The chest of a nearby mechanical warrior was immediately pierced through, and a huge hole appeared. The duo's attacks seemed to have truly opened the curtains to the battle. Their attacks were coordinated seamlessly, and they quickly blocked the mechanical warriors' attacks. Lasers danced in the sky, and the black clouds were torn into countless pieces. Kacha! A bolt of lightning fell from the clouds, followed by countless bolts of lightning, forming a dense electric net that covered the earth. Walala! Heavy rain fell from the sky, as if a huge hole had opened up in the sky. The sound of the rain was like an intense war drum, stimulating each other's fighting spirit. The battle was very tragic. More and more mechanical warriors fell from the sky, and all kinds of parts were scattered all over the ground. Insignificant tricks, unable to withstand a single blow. Finally, all the mechanical warriors were shot down. Qi Yu stood proudly and said disdainfully. Ji Wuxiang stood at the side with a resolute look in his eyes. Suddenly, he said in a clear voice, "Everyone, listen up. We are only here to look for the 100 Change Star Sovereign. Those who are not involved should all retreat. Otherwise, it is none of our business if we are implicated." This was the center of power after all. Ji Wuxiang was a secular person, and he understood what this meant more than Qi Yu. He did not want to completely fall out with them until the last moment. In the house that was still intact, more than 10 people fell into silence. The one in the middle was 100 Faces, and Junko was standing beside him with a nervous expression. Hearing that Ji Wuxiang was looking for the Celestial Lord, Junko was horrified and said, "Master, could it be that you've been exposed and they have seen through your identity?" 100 Faces' expression kept changing, and his eyes flickered with a crafty luster. Suddenly, he sneered, "See through my identity? Who in this world can see through my 100 transformations?" Obviously, he was extremely confident and did not believe that Qi Yu and Ji Wuxiang could see through him. His gaze was both deep and sharp as it fell on Junko's body. An idea suddenly struck him, as if a bolt of lightning had struck his brain. "It's you." His eyes were like torches as he stared at Junko. "It's not me who was exposed, but you." He thought for a long time, and this was the only thing that could explain all of this. Junko was followed by Qi Yu and Ji Wuxiang, so she was brought here. Otherwise, why would they kill her as soon as she came back? 100 Faces Luo Ji's thinking ability was not weak, and he immediately thought of this flaw. He naturally blamed all of this on Junko. Junko immediately understood this point, and her face turned pale. She stammered, "I have been very careful." However, when he saw the gloomy expression on the 100 Transformation Starlord's face, he was unable to continue. "Master, it's all my fault." Junko's voice was as low as a mosquito's, and she looked at 100 Faces with guilt and pleading eyes. 100 Faces glared at her, but at this critical moment, he could not really punish her. Moreover, she went out to investigate for clues because of him. At this moment, he finally knew the whereabouts of Ji Wuxiang and Qi Yu. It turned out that they came directly to the capital, but the question was, why did they come for him? He did not offend them, at least not recently. And for them to be so angry, there must be something fishy, but he did not know it for the time being. But at this critical moment, he must not show up, otherwise, he would be besieged by the two angry people. No matter how strong his confidence was, he did not think he could win. He must figure out the problem and solve this crisis. You hide first. 100 Faces waved his hand, and Junko disappeared. She had been put into his storage magic treasure. He casually walked out of the house with his guards and looked up at the sky. At this time, the three people in the sky were also staring at him at the same time. The 100 Faces Star Sovereign did not lower his imposing manner. He raised his eyebrows and asked aggressively, "You dare to attack this place? Do you want to make the entire country your enemy?" Although this question was equivalent to asking in vain, it was in line with 100 Faces' current identity. He played a complete act, and it was difficult to distinguish between the truth and the lies. Even the most familiar people would not be able to see through his flaws. Qi Yu did not waste time with him, and roared angrily, "Quickly hand over 100 Faces Star, otherwise, this place of yours will be completely lost." "What 100 Faces Star, why is he here?" "This is my place." 100 Faces Star's finger fiercely poked the ground a few times, and said coldly, "To read a novel without mistakes, please visit Chapter 1454. Qi Yu and Ji Wuxiang looked at each other when they saw that the chief was neither servile nor overbearing. The reaction of the chief was out of their expectations. His moral integrity really made their eyes light up. However, Qi Yu and Ji Wuxiang did not appreciate this. After all, the other party was refuting them. Their faces darkened and they said, "The 100 Faces Star Lord is good at the art of transformation. It is very likely that he will become anyone around you. If you protect him like this, you will be the one who will suffer in the future. The 100 Faces Star Lord is not a kind person." The 100 Faces Star Lord's heart twitched and he was furious. These two fellows kept on slandering him. It was really detestable. "Shut up. Since when is it up to you to tell me what to do? I have seen everything. Who can deceive my eyes?" The 100 Faces Star Lord said confidently in the tone of the chief. Qi Yu and the 100 Faces Star Lord looked at him with disdain. He was indeed a mortal who was ignorant and arrogant. If it was something else, perhaps they would give him face. However, this was a serious matter. Moreover, the 100 Faces Star Lord had tricked them. This kind of provocation was absolutely intolerable. Therefore, the two looked at each other tacitly and understood each other's thoughts. They made a move. In the eyes of people like them, family and country were not worth mentioning. After all, they were people from different eras. Back then, they were existences that surpassed countries. They were supreme and would not change too much with the changes of time and environment. Wait. Suddenly, the Empyrean fairy, who had been silent all this time, opened her mouth. The two turned to look at her suspiciously. Their eyes were deep and they sneered. "You still want to stop us?" "No." The Empyrean fairy smiled meaningfully. Her eyes lingered on the chief and she was quite playful. The 100 Faces Star Lord's heart trembled. He looked at the Empyrean fairy unkindly and muttered in his heart, "Did this woman see through something?" He had crossed swords with the Empyrean fairy several times, so he knew how powerful she was. He knew very well that after the Battle of Tian Shan, Tang Zheng had died in battle and the Empyrean fairy had fallen into Qi Yu's hands. Now, she was Qi Yu's captive. He didn't want to let the other party speak, so he preemptively said, I was wondering who it was." "So it's a prisoner. Now it seems like you've recognized the thief as your father, right?" His sarcastic words made one feel ashamed. The Empyrean fairy did not get angry. Instead, the smile on her face grew wider. When Qi Yu saw this, his heart skipped a beat and he revealed a curious expression. The Empyrean fairy would not speak without thinking. She must have seen through something. Ji Wuxiang also thought of this, so the two of them simultaneously stopped the idea of fighting. They wanted to see what the Empyrean fairy saw. Making such a big fuss shows that you have a guilty conscience. If you weren't so aggressive, I wouldn't have suspected you. But your aura is too strong, so I can't help but feel suspicious, the Empyrean fairy said calmly. What guilty conscience? Nonsense, the hundred-faced Star Lord said fiercely, hiding his guilt. The Empyrean fairy was unmoved. I've met the real chief several times. I don't know him very well, but I do know him relatively well. When faced with such a situation, his instinctive reaction is definitely not like this. Am I right? The Empyrean fairy turned to ask Ji Wuxiang. A bolt of lightning flashed through Ji Wuxiang's mind as he came to a sudden realization. How could he have overlooked such a serious flaw when dealing with the upper echelons all year round? Although the chief was in charge of the central government and had great authority, there were many things in his bones that would never change. For example, his fear of super experts. He shouldn't be so confident and fearless. This was indeed not his style. The mysterious maiden of the 9 heavens woke Chi Yu up with a single sentence. Her following words caused everyone to turn pale with fright as they cried out in alarm. Actually, you are the celestial master of 100 forms. The Empyrean fairy pointed at the chief with her finger, hitting the nail on the head. Ah! Chi Yu and Ji Wuxiang exclaimed in a low voice, their eyes fixed on the hundred-faced Star Lord. The hundred-faced Star Lord is the best at transformation. I've already experienced it before. You turning into the chief is the most flawless plan, and no one will find out. Monopolizing power is not only good for hiding yourself, it's also good for your schemes, isn't it? The Empyrean fairy's words tore off the hundred-faced Star Lord's disguise and exposed his sinister intentions. His expression was no longer so righteous and fearless. The subtle reaction of the chief had an unusual meaning in the eyes of Chi Yu and Ji Wuxiang. The two almost immediately believed the Empyrean fairy's words. This chief was an impostor, and his real identity was the hundred-faced Star Lord. This was the only way to explain all of this. They had thought too simply of the hundred-faced Star Lord. He wouldn't be satisfied with becoming the chief's subordinate. That would be too low-level. Replacing him would be the wiser choice. Hundred-faced Star Lord, your disguise has been seen through. What's the point of continuing? Your courage hasn't shrunk at all. Chi Yu mocked. The hundred-faced Star Lord's expression was extremely gloomy. He glared at the Empyrean fairy and said through gritted teeth, "Woman, you're ruining my plans again. One day, I'll kill you." The Empyrean fairy was unmoved. Then you'll have to escape death from those two first. Escape death? I don't need to escape. Instead, it's the two of you who will die without a burial ground. The hundred-faced Star Lord was still arrogant, as if he didn't put them in his eyes at all. Ha ha ha. Chi Yu and Ji Wuxiang laughed at the same time. If it was said that they were a little afraid of the chief's identity before, they didn't have any now. Hundred-faced Star Lord, from the moment you did this, no, from the moment you had that thought, you were destined to die. Ji Wuxiang said with a murderous aura. The hundred-faced Star Lord asked suspiciously, "What did I do to make you want to kill me so much? Now that things have come to this, what's the use of denying?" The two of them didn't listen to the hundred-faced Star Lord at all. After all, he had wanted to deceive them just now. At this moment, they naturally wouldn't believe anything the hundred-faced Star Lord said. The hundred-faced Star Lord rolled his eyes speechlessly. What did he deny? He was the hundred-faced Star Lord. Was there a need to deny it? But seeing that the two of them didn't want to hear more, the hundred-faced Star Lord's arrogance and fierceness were aroused. With a fierce expression, he said, "Since that's the case, then die." He raised his big hand. Ka ka ka, the sound of something opening rang out. Then, everyone saw that the sturdiest house automatically opened to two sides, revealing a pitch-black hole. A rumbling sound came from the hole. A beam of light rushed out and shone into the sky. It was like a sword of light, directly piercing through the dense black clouds. What is that? Qi Yu and Ji Wuxiang opened their eyes wide. A giant gradually rose from the hole. With a whoosh, it flew into the sky and floated in midair. The giant's body was made of the toughest metal, full of strength and beauty, giving people a feeling of invincibility. That's King Kong. The Empyrean fairy shouted. She recognized it at a glance, but this King Kong was different from the one she had seen before. It seemed to be an upgraded version. King Kong was a mecha warrior. It was driven by the inner core of a demonic beast, and its strength was not inferior to that of a cultivator expert. After the 100-faced Star Lord took control of the situation, he obviously didn't settle down to enjoy life. Instead, he thought of all kinds of ways to improve his overall strength. This giant mecha was one of his first choices. She believed that the upgraded King Kong would be completely different from before. Her eyes lit up as she secretly rejoiced. Perhaps the opportunity she had been waiting for was coming. You dare to use a pile of scrap metal to make a fool of yourself? 100-faced Star Lord, I really overestimated you. Qi didn't put King Kong in his eyes at all. The 100-faced Star Lord revealed a mocking expression and laughed wildly. Qi, you really are stubborn. You don't know how to keep up with the times. The power of technology is far more powerful than you can imagine. Let me tell you, its name is King Kong. This is the ultimate, most perfect version. Soon, you will be able to experience its power. The 100-faced Star Lord waved his hand and gave the order. With an unstoppable momentum, King Kong spewed out 2 balls of blue flames from its feet. With a whoosh, it attacked Qi Yu. The distance seemed to be very far, but in the blink of an eye, a ball of fire was spat out from King Kong's fist. With a piercing sound, it drew a long line in the air. Even the falling rain couldn't extinguish the ball of fire. The ball of fire flew directly in front of Qi Yu. The light from the fire illuminated him, making his expression look somewhat ferocious. Insignificant skill. Qi Yu's sword flashed and flew out, accurately hitting the ball of fire. Boom! The ball of fire exploded, and a huge shockwave spread out in all directions. Qi Yu was also affected. His body shook a few times, but in the end, he held on and didn't take half a step back. However, the power of the ball of fire made him frown slightly. This was more powerful than a normal bomb. This King Kong was indeed worthy of its reputation. But so what? It was a dead object after all. How could it be a match for Qi Yu? Who? Another beam of light descended from the sky, directly splitting the clouds and scattering the rain. Even the air was split into 2 sides, as if it was attacking Qi Yu with an earth-shattering momentum. Not only Qi Yu, but the other 2 also felt the same pressure and aura. They saw clearly what was going on. It turned out that the beam of light had been firmly grasped in King Kong's hand. It was like a light sword, bursting with great power. Qi Yu, aren't you proficient in sword arts? Have a taste of technology. How does this light sword taste? The 100-faced Star Lord smiled proudly. Light sword. Qi Yu softly repeated these 3 words. Isn't this the same as sword qi? What's the big deal? Sword qi was also a form of energy. When it was released from the sword, it had a high requirement for the sword wielder. Chapter 1455. King Kong looked down from above. Not only could it fly freely, its body was even larger and majestic, causing people to feel reverence when they looked at it. It held a beam saber in its hand, and the huge beam saber split the sky, cutting through the rain curtain, and slashing towards Qi Yu with an earth-shattering momentum. In front of King Kong, Qi Yu was like a baby facing a giant. However, when Qi Yu raised the War Soul sword high up, everything changed. Although he was still as tall as before, his aura was completely different. It was as if he had grown a lot taller and was not any weaker than King Kong. Whoosh! The beam saber landed in front of Chiyu, and the air crackled as heat waves surged into the sky. 9 Shaman Sword Technique. Chiyu shouted in a low voice. The War Soul Sword shone brightly and its sword intense sword. It even emitted a buzzing sound as it was extremely excited. The War Soul Sword also yearned for this battle. Swish! 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 The sword light rose and thousands of sword lights shot out from the War Soul Sword, wrapping around the War Soul Sword. At this moment, the War Soul Sword suddenly grew larger and finally turned into a huge sword. Although it was slightly smaller than the beam saber, it was already a peerless divine sword as it slashed towards the beam saber. Clang! 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 Sparks flew in all directions, as if meteors were sprinkling down from the sky, covering the dark sky. The rain was completely blocked out by the sword light, forming a huge vacuum. Chiyu and Kong Kim were fighting back and forth in this huge space. They were having a great time killing each other. The others stared at this battle without blinking, not willing to miss any details. Especially the strength displayed by King Kong, which greatly exceeded their expectations. The power of technology could not be ignored. The 100 Change Star Lord's eyes shone brightly. He had made the right move. If not for King Kong restraining Chiyu, he would have been in a situation where he would definitely lose. In fact, the 100 Change Star Lord understood Chiyu very well. After all, they were from the same generation. Chiyu had unified the 9 Li tribe. It could be seen that not only was his skill strong, his strength was unquestionable. These two were indispensable. Otherwise, in that environment back then, it would have been impossible for him to fight for the world. Now that Chiyu was his enemy, he naturally did not dare to underestimate him. As for whether King Kong could withstand Chiyu, that was a 50-50 chance. He was not as confident as he had vowed. King Kong only knew how to kill and fight, he did not have his own thoughts. However, Chiyu was different. Through this intense battle, he gradually gained new insights and finally understood the power of technology. The battle prowess of the Vajra was comparable to that of a cultivator who had just reached the threshold of the Mahayana realm. However, the most important thing was that the beam saber complemented the Vajra, and the power it could unleash was extremely terrifying. But the only drawback was that the beam saber was too big and was not flexible enough. For example, the battle soul could suddenly change its size and could often catch the enemy off guard and win. The War Soul Sword flashed and a ray of sword light separated. Like a wild horse that had escaped its reins, it whizzed behind King Kong and slashed towards his back. Boom! With a loud bang, a fine crack appeared on the back of the King Kong. The sword light did not penetrate it. The material of the King Kong was one of the hardest materials in the world. It was not so easy to completely break through. King Kong did not feel any pain at all. Although a crack appeared on its back, its battle prowess was not affected at all. The beam saber fell from the sky and slashed towards Chiyu's head. Pooh! The air was cut in half and a blazing heat wave rushed towards Chiyu, as if it was going to ignite his hair. Chiyu's eyes burst out with a terrifying light and he roared, "Break!" Shwa! The battle soul sword moved from bottom to top, carrying an unparalleled aura. It slashed diagonally onto the beam saber and sparks flew in all directions. The battle soul sword slid along the beam saber. Kacha! Finally, the battle soul sword slashed onto the beam saber's hilt. The sharp edge of the sword cut King Kong's wrist. In the sparks, King Kong's appearance was somewhat sinister. The corner of Chiyu's mouth curled up and he sneered proudly, "This is the time." Pooh! The tip of War Soul's sword turned and directly cut deeper into the crack on King Kong's wrist. Half of his arm immediately fell off. The beam saber instantly lost the support of its energy. The soaring beam saber disappeared, leaving only the hilt and half of his arm. This, the 100 Faces Star Lord turned pale. He did not expect King Kong to be defeated like this. Without the beam saber, King Kong's power was greatly reduced. The 100 Faces Star Lord's face was sinister. He gritted his teeth and said, "King Kong, continue to attack." King Kong seemed to have been activated. Its eyes burst out with a terrifying light. Its remaining hand clenched into a fist and fiercely swung towards Chi Yu's head. "Humph, insignificant skill. Break for me." Chi Yu's attack succeeded and his confidence increased. The battle soul sword hit King Kong's wrist again. King Kong's entire body was incomparably hard. However, the wrist was the joint between the two mechanical parts. It was a natural weak point. Chi Yu discovered this clue in the continuous battles. That was why he identified this weak point and gave it a fierce blow. As expected, it was a hit. In the blink of an eye, both of King Kong's wrists were broken. Without his wrists, King Kong was equivalent to a cripple. Its power was greatly reduced. So. Suddenly, two foreign objects appeared from behind King Kong. With the sound of breaking through the air, two missiles flew out from behind it and shot straight towards Chi Yu. Chi Yu somersaulted in the air and dodged the missile attack. However, the missile had already locked onto him and actually turned back in midair and continued to fly towards him. It's as if it has eyes. Chi Yu looked at the missile in surprise and clicked his tongue in wonder. But in fact, he did not put the missile in his eyes. The battle soul sword shone brightly and instantly turned into a huge sword, slashing towards the missile in the air. Boom boom. Two earth-shattering sounds rang out as the missile was split apart by the battle soul sword. Then, it exploded with a loud bang. The explosive wave soared into the sky and directly created two large holes in the black clouds that filled the sky. It was like two empty eye sockets that looked down at everything below. It was extremely terrifying. The rain that filled the sky disappeared under this hole, forming a vacuum. This scene firmly attracted everyone's attention, including the huge capital. Almost everyone's gaze was focused on it. The momentum of this battle was too great, and the geographical location was so special. It was hard not to attract attention. The capital had already reacted at the fastest speed possible. All sorts of alarms resounded through the sky, as if they wanted to tear everything apart. Countless police lights and armed personnel quickly gathered here from all directions. As for the ordinary people, they were all dumbstruck as they looked at this scene in disbelief. In their consciousness, this was the center of power, high and mighty. How could anyone dare to move on top of Tai Sui's head? All the forces in the capital wanted to use all their means to find out what was going on. Chapter 1456. The man walked briskly, and with every step he took, water splashed in all directions. He whistled as he walked past the red lights and green lights, heading towards the center of the battle. The road was already crowded with people, and they all stopped to watch. Some were shocked, some were curious, and some were excited. Their round eyes were wide open as they stared straight into the distance. The man walked through the crowd like a fish in water. He was not affected by the crowd at all. Not long after, he left most of the people behind and arrived at his destination. The place was completely under martial law, and the area had been cleared into a vacuum. Other than the armed military police, there were no other ordinary people. These people were nervous and busy, but they did not seem to notice the uninvited guest at all. He openly walked through the layers of blockade and directly came to the center of the battle. At this moment, in this huge courtyard house, even the military police could be counted on one hand. Everyone was whispering, as if discussing what to do. But there was no doubt that this area had become an impenetrable fortress that would not tolerate irrelevant people entering or leaving. But this person was an exception. He stopped and observed for a moment, then said, "Chi Yu has really regressed. You have to take so long to deal with a dead thing." If other people heard these words, they would be shocked and think that he was boasting shamelessly. But Chi Yu did not think so when he heard these words. This person was indeed qualified to say these words. Because he was the inner demons. The inner demons had promised Tang Jing that they would help him deal with Qiyu. But he had always stayed in the capital, and Qiyu had never set foot in the capital, so the two sides had never really confronted each other. But this time, Qiyu had taken the initiative to come to the capital. Because of the promise, the inner demons naturally would not sit idly by. Although the inner demons knew that Tang Jing was dead, since he had promised Tang Jing, he would not change his promise because of his life or death. Tang Jing, this is the last thing I'm going to do for you. You should be able to rest in peace now that you're dead. The heart demon muttered to itself in a low voice. The battle in the sky had undergone a huge change. Having lost its beams, saber and missiles, King Kong had lost all of its attacking power. Another sword light flashed, and the War Soul sword cut across the King Kong's thigh. With a kacha sound, the King Kong staggered and fell to the ground. Before it could get up, Qiyu leaped and flew to the top of its head. The War Soul sword was placed behind its neck. Qiyu was full of arrogance and said fiercely, "Destroy them completely." Whoosh! Sparks flew wherever the sword passed, and King Kong's head drooped down bit by bit. Finally, with a whoosh, it fell from the air and smashed heavily onto the ground. Boom! Coincidentally, the head hit the only intact house, causing the others to retreat in fear. The multiform star sovereign turned pale as he watched this scene. He did not expect Vajra to be defeated so quickly, without the slightest hesitation. He looked up into the sky and saw Chiyu's proud expression. His heart skipped a beat, and an ominous premonition instantly enveloped his entire body. This is not good. I should escape. Saving my life is more important. 100 Changes Star Lord was nervous. He subconsciously looked outside the field. In the distance, the black mass of military police was ready to attack at any time. This was the only thing he could rely on. He had to rely on these people to delay the other party's footsteps. Only then could he create a chance for himself to escape. However, whether or not he would succeed was unknown. After all, Ji Wuxiang had not made a move yet. 100 Changes Star Lord could not figure out how deep his water was. Everyone, listen up. Kill these murderers without mercy. 100 Changes Star Lord's voice was full of energy. His deep and loud voice spread to every corner and everyone's ears. This was the bugle call to charge. In an instant, everyone swept over like a tide. Although they knew that these people were powerful, they still charged forward without hesitation. This was their natural duty. Once the order was given, there was no room for retreat. In fact, in a flash, they did not even think about this problem. Ji Wuxiang and Qiyu did not care about these people at all. Qiyu seemed like he was going to start a massacre, but Ji Wuxiang made a move first. He walked in the air, his feet moving in a strange direction. Waves of mysterious power were triggered by him. Above the 9 heavens, the mighty power of the stars penetrated layers of black clouds and directly shrouded this space. Ji Wuxiang formed a seal with his hands. As he opened and closed them, he let out a long roar like muffled thunder. Seal. Everyone seemed to have encountered an invisible wall. They hit it hard and made muffled sounds, but they could not take another step forward. There was a hubbub of voices. Many people did not know what was going on, but they continued to charge forward as if they wanted to use their strength to break the invisible barrier. Who knew, in the end, it was proven that their efforts were in vain. The meaningless struggle was not effective at all. Ji Wuxiang was arrogant. He looked down at the feudal people below and said disdainfully, "You want to break my barrier with this bit of power? You overestimate yourself." Who knew? Before he could finish the word, power, it was as if someone was strangling his throat, and he could not say another word. His eyes were wide open as he stared straight down at the sea of people below. A person had actually crossed the barrier he had set up so easily, as if he was taking a stroll in the park. How was this possible? This was the only thought left in his mind. How did this person do it? How could this person cross the barrier that I set up so easily? He was puzzled and looked as if he had seen a ghost. Another question immediately popped up in his mind. This person was definitely not an ordinary person. Who was he? Was he an accomplice of the Hundred Faces Star Lord? Why had he not heard anything about him? Many questions came one after another like an avalanche, causing him to have a hard time coming up with a solution. The other party seemed to have noticed his distress. He raised his head and glanced at him mysteriously. Ji Wuxiang even saw a playful smile on the other party's face. This was a provocation, and it was full of meaning. This provocation caused Ji Wuxiang's heart to jump because he suddenly realized that the other party was not overestimating himself and seeking death. The other party had calmly crossed the barrier that he had set up, which proved his strength. No, why does this person's face look so familiar? Where have I seen him before? Ji Wuxiang immediately saw the clue. Huang Ziang. With a flash of inspiration, he finally recognized him. Isn't this Huang Ziang who has become a puppet? Why did he become so lively and full of spiritual qi? There must be a mystery behind this. Chapter 1457. Huang Ziang. Everyone stared at him without blinking. How did he become so powerful? Ji Wuxiang and Qi Yu looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. No one knew that this person was no longer Huang Ziang, but the inner demons. The inner demons raised his head and smiled meaningfully. He looked at the two people in the air provocatively and said, "Qi Yu, we meet again." He directly called Qi Yu by his name. Moreover, his tone shocked everyone. This voice was like thunder in Qi Yu's ears. It shook his heart and he cried out in shock, You are the inner demons." The inner demons sneered, "Qi Yu, your eyes are not blind." After a slight pause, the inner demons continued, "Back then, you used all kinds of sinister methods and even used a cage to imprison me, but in the end, I still regained my freedom. This is the will of heaven, ha ha ha." His words were full of pride. This arrogant laughter was like a steel needle that ruthlessly pierced Qi Yu's heart. He said with a livid face, "The will of heaven, you really have the nerve to put gold on your face. I didn't kill you back then, but now you may not be so lucky." The inner demon said disapprovingly, "Is that so? I don't think so. Could it be that you think that after tens of thousands of years, you can kill me now?" Qi Yu didn't say a word, but his silence was equivalent to an answer. He really couldn't kill the inner demons. It was like this tens of thousands of years ago, and it was still like this now. The others stared at Qi Yu curiously. They didn't expect that there would be a day when he would be pushed to such a state. Wasn't he high and mighty, the hero who galloped the world tens of thousands of years ago? Who was this inner demons? They could actually do this. All eyes subconsciously fell on the inner demons. That mysterious aura did not match his ordinary appearance. The inner demons enjoyed the feeling of being the center of attention. It was as if they had returned to tens of thousands of years ago, when he was once again the center of attention, the center of attention, the center of attention, and the center of attention. He looked around calmly, but his gaze was as proud as that of an invincible General Sheng. He slowly opened his mouth and said, "In your eyes, perhaps Qi Yu is high and mighty and invincible. But today, I want to tell you that Qi Yu is not the person who will always stand at the top of the altar. His position is not unbreakable." These words were sonorous and forceful, like a heavy hammer pounding on everyone's hearts. The shock in everyone's hearts could be imagined. Everyone looked at the two of them suspiciously. They could vaguely guess what was going to happen, and some were even looking forward to it. This was because what was about to happen would definitely be extraordinary. As expected, the inner demons walked towards Qi Yu leisurely. But with every step he took, his body would rise up a notch. It was as if there was an invisible staircase beneath his feet, lifting him up. Qi Yu's pupils shrank as he stared at the inner demon's feet. If it was before, although Qi Yu was afraid of the inner demons, it was more because the inner demons couldn't be killed, and his own fighting strength was not that high. But now, the strength displayed by the inner demons was clearly different from the information he had received. This seemingly effortless act of walking up the stairs actually required a high level of skill. Especially under the dual pressure of Qi Yu and Ji Wuxiang, the fact that he was able to remain so calm and composed was enough to explain everything. In a flash, the inner demons had already walked in front of Qi Yu. Qi Yu and Ji Wuxiang looked at him with uncertainty. Except for Qi Yu, even Ji Wuxiang didn't know much about the inner demons. But seeing the inner demon's aura and Qi Yu's reaction, he could infer that this person was not ordinary. Ji Wuxiang subconsciously gathered all his energy, ready to attack. Once the inner demons made a move, he would definitely make the first move to gain the upper hand and not give his opponent a single chance. This was the experience he had gained after experiencing the incident with Tang Zheng. At that time, he didn't think highly of Tang Zheng. Later on, Tang Zheng caused him so much trouble. All of this was the serious consequence of underestimating his opponent. Ji Wuxiang would never make the same mistake twice. Qi Yu stared at the inner demons without blinking, guarding against him. The inner demons had clearly come prepared, which was why they had appeared in public. Qi Yu had to be on guard. Now, in this world, the only person who had a long-cherished wish for the inner demon, or could be said to be the enemy of the inner demon, was Qi Yu. How could Qi Yu let his guard down? When Hundred Change saw the inner demons, his eyes suddenly lit up. Not only had he heard of many glorious deeds of the inner demons, but he had even witnessed it with his own eyes. Naturally, he knew how powerful the inner demons were. Moreover, in the prehistoric heavenly tomb, the battle between the inner demons and the Yellow Emperor's remnant soul had left a deep impression on Hundred Change. Although Hundred Change was also very curious about how the inner demons could be resurrected, he knew that this was his only chance of survival. The inner demons seemed to be able to see through people's hearts. He turned his head and smiled meaningfully at Hundred Change. Hundred Change's heart trembled. Only then did he remember that the inner demons were the best at seeing through people's thoughts. There was no way he could hide his thoughts from the inner demons. With that thought in mind, the 100 Transformation Star-Lord looked directly at the inner demon. The inner demons turned his head, no longer paying attention to him. His gaze swept past Qi Yu, Ji Wuxiang, and the Empyrean Fairy. Someone has been looking for her. The inner demons pointed at the Empyrean Fairy and said. The Empyrean Fairy's expression was normal, but Qi Yu's pupils shrank. You're related to the Emperor of Heaven? Emperor of Heaven? The inner demons sneered. I don't know any Emperor of Heaven. Then who's looking for her? Qi Yu was full of suspicion. The inner demon smiled mysteriously and didn't tell the truth. You'll know when the time comes, she said indifferently. He knew that Tang Zheng had faked his death, so he naturally wouldn't reveal it. Qi Yu's heart was heavy. He snorted and said provocatively, the great inner demons actually dare to play riddles with me. This isn't your style. The inner demons was unmoved. Why would I play riddles with you? I'm here for revenge. Back then, you and the Yellow Emperor worked together to imprison me. I've remembered this grudge for tens of thousands of years. Now, it's time to pay it back. If I were given another chance, would still do the same. No, Qi Yu suddenly denied himself. I'll do everything I can to kill you. I believe that there will always be a way to kill a freak like you. Freak. Ha ha ha. The inner demons laughed wildly. His smile was sinister and gave people a very frightening feeling. I'm a freak in your eyes, but that's only because your skills aren't as good as mine. Humph, I've seen through you hypocrites long ago. Whether it's you or Qi Yu, you're all jackals of the same tribe. From now on, there's only me, the inner demons, in this world. The inner demons was very emotional. He said without stopping, I'll let you know what it's like to be ruled by a freak. I'll let you see how much power and influence a freak like you can have. The inner demons became more and more excited as he spoke. His cheeks turned red. Obviously, he had been oppressed for too long. Tens of thousands of years ago, he was suppressed by two powerful forces. Later on, he was suppressed in the bronze coffin. No matter what, the inner demons had lived a very sullen life. He didn't want to at all. Now that he had a chance to live again, he naturally wanted to follow his heart. He had been hospitalized since the day before yesterday, and had undergone surgery yesterday. He really didn't have the energy and time to update. Today, he finally had the chance to dictate it, but someone else typed it out and updated it. He still had to stay in the hospital for a few days. To read the latest novel, please visit the website. Chapter 1458. The inner demons looked crazy and ferocious. Shi Yu and Ji Wuxiang were puzzled by his secretive words. They didn't know why he was deliberately mystifying things. In fact, the inner demons didn't know that Tang Zheng had faked his death at first. They had always thought that he was dead after hearing rumors from the outside world. But he still didn't forget his promise with Tang Zheng and decided to fulfill it. A few days ago, he returned to Tang Zheng's base camp on a whim. He planned to tell Tian Chanzi and the others about his decision. He didn't want them to think that he had failed to keep his promise. The inner demons were good at reading other people's minds. After Tian Chanzi and the others met the inner demons, it was impossible for them to hide the fact that Tang Zheng had faked his death. The inner demons knew the whole story. The inner demons suddenly understood. He couldn't help but sigh at this boy's courage and carefulness. He had actually taken advantage of the situation and set up such a shocking trap. Since Tang Zheng had deceived everyone, he naturally wouldn't spread the news. He didn't want to ruin Tang Zheng's plan. In addition, he also decided to act in advance. Otherwise, he would definitely be scolded by Tang Zheng the next time they met. It just so happened that Qi Yu was making a scene in the capital. The inner demons couldn't sit still anymore and stepped forward bravely. The inner demons was completely enraged by Qi Yu's words about freaks. His eyes were red, and he sneered. Now, accept the wrath of a freak. The inner demons took a step forward. It seemed ordinary, but the scene around them immediately changed dramatically. Everyone's heart was shaken. A sense of fear grew from the depths of their hearts. They widened their round eyes. Not only were their final targets, Qi Yu and Ji Wuxiang, affected, but even the Empyrean Fairy and the 100 Faces Star Master were no exception. The fear in the depths of their hearts was like a flood that broke through a dam. It continuously rushed out, causing their faces to suddenly change color and their breathing to become rapid. In their eyes, the scene in front of them had undergone an earth-shattering change. Moreover, what each of them saw was completely different. This was the power of the inner demons' attacks. Not only could they attack multiple targets at the same time, but they could also attack each target differently. Because everyone's fear was different, their attacks had to be tailored. In the Empyrean Fairy's eyes, the scene before her eyes flashed, and she returned to a world filled with the fragrance of flowers. Fairy Qi lingered in the air, and red-crowned cranes danced in the air. It was truly a fairyland. A little girl was playing in this wonderland, accompanied by a fairy-like woman. Her face was full of love, and she would whisper to the girl from time to time, showing her motherly love. Suddenly, the girl was startled and raised her head. Her eyes glowed with white light like ice, and ice crystals instantly condensed all over her body. The woman's expression changed greatly. She hurriedly protected the girl and tried to circulate her energy to dissolve the ice. However, an ice crystal like a sharp sword suddenly shot out from the girl's body. Puff! The ice crystal pierced through the woman's chest. Blood dyed her entire body red and sprinkled in this paradise filled with birds and fragrant flowers. The world quickly turned blood red. The Empyrean Fairy's breathing was rapid, and her whole body was drenched in sweat, as if she had just been fished out of the water. This was the deepest fear in her heart. She had deliberately forgotten it for many years, but she did not expect that it would be evoked by the inner demons today. Her whole body trembled, and she could barely stand. Ji Wuxiang saw a completely different scene. It was a dark house, and he was kneeling in front of an old man. Suddenly, a cold light flashed in his hand, and a short sword pierced directly into the old man's heart. The old man died with his eyes wide open. He stretched out his trembling finger, and with the last of his strength, he weakly shouted 2 words, evil, disciple. Ji Wuxiang stood up, and the corner of his mouth curved into a cruel smile. The hand holding the sword was still trembling, and he could only hear him whispering to himself, "Don't blame me, blame yourself for not believing in the celestial chest that I created." Ji Wuxiang's face was deathly pale. He had never lost his composure like this before. The scene in front of him evoked the restless fear in his heart. His ascension to the throne of the Azure Dragon Hall's High Lord seemed justified, but in reality, it was an act of treason. All of this was because the old Azure Dragon Hall's High Lord did not agree with the celestial chest that he created. He thought it was nonsense and deliberately mystifying. No matter who stood in his way, he would not show mercy, even if it was the master who raised him and taught him. This was a secret that no one knew. Seeing this scene again, his feelings in his heart could be imagined. If all of this were to be made public, then he would bear infamy for eternity. How could he be immortalized because he created the celestial chess? Qiyu saw an ancient battlefield, where countless experts were killing each other. And Qiyu was facing an equally mighty and powerful figure, the Yellow Emperor. After a bitter battle, Qiyu was defeated. The Battle of Zhuolu was the deepest fear in his heart. Because he was utterly defeated and completely erased. All of his efforts were in vain. This was his deepest fear. Qiyu was not afraid of anything and was number 1. In fact, he was still deeply afraid of the Yellow Emperor. Because he had seen his opponent's strength. The Yellow Emperor had defeated him fair and square. This was an absolute strength. He had no choice but to be afraid. Hundred Faces Star Sovereign's face was deathly pale. When he saw Buzhou Mountain being hit, although he kept saying that he did not regret breaking Buzhou Mountain, he was not even afraid at all. But in reality, after doing all of this, he was indeed afraid. He was not afraid of anything, but he also knew that he had made a huge mistake. This fear stayed in his heart, took root and grew into the source of his fear. No, he kept talking to himself as if he was sleep-talking. His fists were clenched tightly. At the scene, the only ones who were not affected by the inner demon's attack were the mechanical warriors. They were not living beings, but a group of steel monsters. Therefore, spiritual attacks did not work on them. However, without Hundred Faces Star Sovereign's orders, they were like steel puppets, motionless. The inner demons looked at their changing expressions and was extremely pleased. His actual combat strength was not as good as Qiyu's. Even if he had Huang Xiang's body, it was difficult for him to reach Qiyu's level. But his spiritual attacks were too powerful. In just a thought, the few of them fell into his trap at the same time. The inner demon's eyes shone. Taking advantage of the moment when the other party was distracted, he had already arrived in front of Qiyu. Whoosh! A light palm strike came out, but in fact, the air in the palm was completely compressed. It was compressed to a critical point, and the air produced a thunder-like sound. Bang! Without any fancy moves, his palm struck Qiyu's chest. Qiyu's chest immediately caved in. The scene in front of Qiyu suddenly changed. He returned to the real world from the Battle of Zhuolu. When he saw his collapsed chest, he spat out a mouthful of blood. His scream was stuck in his throat, unable to come out. But his expression had already revealed many things. His eyes were wide open, as if his eyeballs were about to burst out of their sockets. He was like a kite with a broken string, flying far away. Hundred Faces Star Sovereign tried to take advantage of the situation to pursue, but things were not as easy as he imagined. The sword in Qiyu's hand flashed as War Soul let out a high-pitched sword hum, like a phoenix stretching its neck to sing. Whoosh! The War Soul sword flew out and slashed towards the heart demon, as if it was splitting the heavens and splitting the earth. This power was too earth-shattering, to the point that the heart demon's back was drenched in cold sweat, and he hurriedly dodged to the side. However, this strike condensed all of Qiyu's lifelong knowledge and cultivation. It was a life-saving strike, so there was no way to hide it. The might of this strike caused the world to change color. Although the black clouds in the sky were not struck by the strike, the sword beam's surging sword split the thick clouds into two, opening a huge gap. However, this was only the aftermath of the strike. Its true might was far greater than this. A sword beam flew past the inner demons at a speed visible to the naked eye. The inner demons were like a small boat on a turbulent sea that was struck by the waves. The clothes on the left side of his body cracked and turned to dust, revealing his skin. He was in a sorry state. He tumbled a few times before stabilizing his body. He did not have the time to check his injuries or tidy up his sorry state. His gaze quickly cast in the direction of the sword beam. Boom! Earth-shattering. This word seemed to be tailor-made for this scene. The heavens shook, the earth shook, and then, the earth cracked. As if it had suffered a great earthquake, with the courtyard house as the starting point, a crack appeared in the ground that ran through half of the capital. The capital was divided into two, with a natural chasm as the boundary. The buildings, roads, trees, everything in this chasm was cut in half. This was the true power of Chi Yu's strike. Moreover, it was a strike with all his strength when he was seriously injured and his life was in danger. This was a true expert. A strike to divide the capital. This sword strike would leave an indelible impression on the world, and it would be passed down for generations to come. It would become a popular topic of conversation after a meal. When the inner demons saw this scene, his expression changed and his cheeks burned with pain. Although he kept saying that he wanted to kill Chi Yu, this strike made him realize the gap between his fighting strength and Chi Yu's. He couldn't do that at all. Chi Yu's strike had also shaken the inner demon's mind. This was no less than a mental attack, so much so that the inner demons were completely petrified on the spot like puppets. The aftermath of this sword also pulled the others back to reality from the mental attack. Before they could calm down, they saw the scene in front of them. All of their expressions changed abruptly, and they were extremely shocked. Even Ji Wuxiang, who thought highly of himself, was no exception. He moved his lips, but in the end, he did not say a word. However, silence was better than words. Although he did not say a word, it was better than 1,000 words. The 100-change Star Lord thought himself infallible, but he was also shocked by this scene and finally realized how weak he was. That was because he was absolutely incapable of doing so. Although the Empyrean fairy was also shocked, she was more immersed in the sorrow of the illusion. This was because the little girl in the illusion was her, and the fairy-like woman was her mother. Her mother died because of her. She was still in the hospital and was on infusion every day. Today, I finally wrote a chapter. Please add my WeChat public account, Tang Xiao. I will update you on it every day. To read the latest novel, please visit the website. Chapter 1459. This sword strike had thoroughly intimidated most of the people. The restless powers in the capital all stopped in their tracks, their hearts filled with fear. Ji Wuxiang narrowed his eyes into slits, his gaze as sharp as a knife. He stared at the chasm below, his heart trembling. He thought to himself, Chi Yu, I've really underestimated you. Chi Yu looked at the might of his sword, which had split the capital, but he didn't show the slightest trace of arrogance. That was because his foundation had been shaken by the inner demon's attack. The inner demons had inherited Huang Xiang's battle prowess and had advanced by leaps and bounds. The power of a single strike had almost taken away half of Chi Yu's old life. Chi Yu seemed to have been immobilized. He was frozen in midair like a puppet, glaring at the inner demons with hatred. The inner demon finally came back to his senses. He looked at Chi Yu with a solemn expression. When their eyes met, invisible sparks collided fiercely, making the air seem to boil. The inner demon spoke first. Chi Yu, you're really bold. You wanted to kill me with your own hands. Don't you know that you won't be able to live if you kill me? This was the strength of the inner demons. It was easy to kill him, but he would immediately attach himself to the killer's body and control them. It was precisely this unique characteristic of the inner demons that caused many experts to be wary of taking action, including Chi-Yu and the Yellow Emperor. They only dared to imprison him and didn't dare to kill him. Just now, Chi-Yu had directly used his killing move in a moment of desperation. If the inner demons had been careless, they would have been killed. If that had happened, Chi-Yu's situation wouldn't have been any better. Chi-Yu was well aware of this, which was why he felt a wave of lingering fear. Chi-Yu stared at the inner demons unwillingly. If he could get rid of the inner demons, he wouldn't be so afraid of the inner demons like he was now. For example, although Tang Zheng was possessed by the inner demons, because he did not have any inner demons, he was not afraid of the control of the inner demons. Instead, he imprisoned the inner demons. He was extremely envious of this. Looking at the playful expression of the inner demons, Chi-Yu said fiercely, "Inner demons, don't speak so soon. Times have changed, and things are different now. Do you really think that I haven't found a way to restrain you?" The inner demons laughed hysterically. "Ha ha ha, restrain me? All right, I'll wait and see." As he spoke, he simply crossed his arms and looked at Chi-Yu calmly. The provocation was self-evident. Chi-Yu was angry and resentful, but there was nothing he could do. At least, there was nothing he could do at the moment. His bold words just now were just a bluff. The inner demons had already been resurrected. If he really wanted to kill him, it was easier said than done. Seeing the inner demons directly ask Chi-Yu until he was speechless, the others were shocked. That was Chi-Yu, and he was actually stumped like this. Especially the various forces below, they were completely subdued by the imposing manner of the inner demons. They were deeply shocked. The inner demons was not a demon. Instead, he was like a god, high and mighty, as if he was in an invincible position. Ji Wuxiang's sharp eyes stared at the inner demons. He was carefully examining him, trying to see through him. Especially after hearing the conversation between the two, he understood that there was a secret behind it that no one knew. Although he was the High Lord of the Azure Dragon Hall and was well informed, he did not know most of the secrets from tens of thousands of years ago. Ji Wuxiang asked in a low voice, "What does he mean? Why don't you dare to kill him?" Chi Yu's face was pale. He said somewhat weakly, "You'll know if you try." Ji Wuxiang's pupils shrank. His gaze was like a torch, like a steel knife, as if he wanted to pierce through Chi Yu. Chi Yu was not moved by his imposing manner at all. Seeing this, the Empyrean fairy immediately said, "The inner demons are easy to kill, but his soul is not destroyed. Moreover, he will possess the murderer's body, thus taking over the magpie's nest and resurrecting again." What, there's actually such an unimaginable thing in the world? Ji Wuxiang's eyelids twitched as he cried out in surprise. Even with his wisdom and knowledge, it was difficult for him to remain calm when he heard such an unheard thing. Because, he knew very well what this meant. This meant that the inner demons were in a state of immortality. As long as a person did not die, no matter what kind of attack or inhumane torture he received, he would have a chance to turn the tables. This was the truth that countless people had practiced. Nothing in the world was different from this. The Empyrean fairy smiled mysteriously and egged him on. "If you don't believe me, you can give it a try. In any case, his actual combat ability is definitely not your match." Ji Wuxiang really wanted to give it a try, but seeing Chi Yu's embarrassed state, he resolutely decided to give up on this idea. The Empyrean fairy looked at Ji Wuxiang meaningfully. She knew that her words of provocation had no effect at all. After all, the other party was Ji Wuxiang, not a brat who could be swayed by words. The inner demons did not pay attention to the two's conversation. He only had eyes for Chi Yu. Now that Chi Yu was obviously an arrow at the end of its flight, all the more reason to take advantage of this opportunity to truly kill Chi Yu. Killing Chi Yu would not have any other side effects. On the contrary, it would dissolve the anger that had accumulated in his heart for tens of thousands of years. "Chi Yu, if you don't dare to kill me, then I'll kill you right now." The inner demons roared and launched another attack. Chi Yu hurriedly retreated. His footsteps were slightly staggered, and he was in a rather sorry state. The great Chi-Yu was actually scared off by the inner demons. If word of this got out, wouldn't it make people laugh their heads off? However, Chi-Yu knew that survival was the most important thing. He did not dare to be careless. Seeing that the inner demons were getting closer and closer, he directly pressed down on the cloud and landed on the ground. Chi-Yu tried to blend into the crowd and use various geographical advantages to escape the inner demon's pursuit. Just a moment ago, he was still high and mighty. At this moment, he was completely reduced to a prisoner. Things took a sudden turn for the worse, and this feeling was not pleasant at all. Chi-Yu could only grit his teeth and swallow it. Inner demons, don't go too far. Chi-Yu waved the war spirit sword. The sword light had obviously weakened by too much. The sword attack just now could be considered as overdraft. The power of the sword light was greatly reduced. It slashed towards the inner demons, but the inner demons easily dodged it. The inner demons had just been affected by the sword light, but they did not suffer much damage. So at this moment, they had the upper hand. Chi-Yu secretly glanced at Ji Wuxiang. Ji Wuxiang's gaze was like water. It was very deep, and he had no intention of helping at all. Ji Wuxiang and Chi-Yu had a fragile alliance. In the face of disaster, Ji Wuxiang would not be willing to take the risk to help Chi-Yu. If he was not careful and accidentally killed the inner demons, then the gains would not make up for the losses. It would benefit Chi-Yu for nothing. If Chi-Yu died at the hands of the inner demons, then Ji Wuxiang would benefit instead. Comparing the two, it was easy to see who was better and who was worse. He naturally made a decision. Chi-Yu glared at Ji Wuxiang hatefully. He did not count on him. Suddenly, a figure flashed in front of him. There was another person, 100 Transformation Star Lord. 100 Transformation Star Lord had already returned to his original appearance. When he was attacked by the inner demons, his mind was distracted. After experiencing the most primitive fear, all of his disguises were naturally removed. 100 Transformation Star Lord's eyes flickered. With a wave of his hand, a water dragon flew up from the sky and roared as it charged towards Chi-Yu. Chi-Yu was caught off guard and was hit in the chest by the water dragon. Blood splattered all over the potholes on the ground. To read the latest novel, please visit Chapter 1460. Chi-Yu had never thought that there would be a day when he would receive such a fierce attack from the 100 Transformation Star Lord, almost taking half of his life. The 100 Transformation Star Lord's cheeks revealed a strange expression as he stared straight at Chi-Yu. Seeing the water dragon dissipate, he grabbed with both hands, and the rain pillar in the sky condensed once again, whistling as it rushed towards Chi-Yu. Obviously, the 100 Transformation Star Lord wanted to take the opportunity to add another blade and completely kill Chi-Yu. Chi-Yu was enraged. The 100 Transformation Star Lord was extremely daring. He actually wanted to kill him. Puff! A mouthful of blood spurted out from his mouth, completely spilling onto the war spirit sword. The sword light shone brightly, mixed with the blood light, and soared into the sky. Immediately, the originally low aura of the war spirit sword soared. Its aura was like a rainbow, releasing a resounding sword cry, whistling as it arrived in front of the 100 Transformation Star Lord. The water dragon immediately protected its master, and with a loud bang, water splashed in all directions. The water dragon shattered into pieces, turning into a mist of water. However, this sword was too powerful, and the water dragon did not completely cancel out its power. After it dissipated, the bright red sword light still struck the 100 Transformation Star Lord. Puff! A wound was drawn from the 100 Transformation Star Lord's chest to his neck, dripping with blood. The 100 Transformation Star Lord's pale face was like a dead man's as he fell into a pool of blood, finding it difficult to breathe. Although the 100 Transformation Star Lord knew that his strength was astonishing, he was still not a match for Chi-Yu. The two of them were not opponents of the same order of magnitude. 100 Transformation Star Lord, when did you become so bold? Chi-Yu could not hide his anger as he stared straight at the 100 Transformation Star Lord and roared. Chi-Yu was not completely ignorant of the 100 Transformation Star Lord, and was rather familiar with her personality, but what she had done just now had greatly exceeded his expectations. With Chi Yu's understanding of him, he should have taken the opportunity to escape, and not counterattack. This was too out of character for him. Suddenly, Chi Yu stared at the 100-change Star Lord with a strange look in his eyes. He had noticed something strange about the 100-change Star Lord. The 100 Faces Star Sovereign suffered such a heavy blow, and his life was hanging by a thread. However, he did not show any signs of fear, nor did he have any thoughts of escaping. It was as if he wanted to rush up and fight with Yi Shiwen. Since when did the 100 Faces Star Sovereign become so unafraid of death? There's a problem. Chi Yu immediately determined. 100 Changes Star Sovereign, what's wrong with you? The 100-change Star Sovereign did not answer him. Instead, he struggled to stand up. However, after struggling for a long time, he fell to the ground again. 100-change Star Sovereign's reaction had already explained everything. Chi Yu had a flash of inspiration. He turned his head to look at the inner demons and exclaimed, "You're the one behind this. You're controlling 100 Faces Star Lord?" Chi Yu understood the means of the inner demons, so he immediately saw through the means of the inner demons. The inner demons laughed maniacally and did not deny it. "Chi Yu, you're finally not blind anymore." Chi Yu snorted angrily. "I should have known long ago that your inner demons are the best at controlling others. You're just repeating the same old trick. I just didn't expect 100 Faces Star Sovereign to fall into your hands." The 100 Faces Star Sovereign naturally had inner demons, so he was easily controlled by the inner demons. Earlier, the inner demons' attack had affected Chi Yu, Ji Wuxiang, 100 Faces Star Sovereign, and the Empyrean Fairy. However, Chi Yu and Ji Wuxiang were more resolute, so the inner demons did not manage to control them. As for the Empyrean Fairy, the inner demons naturally wouldn't attack her because of her close relationship with Tang Zheng. Thus, the only one left was 100 Faces Star Sovereign, who was weaker in cultivation and had no relationship with the inner demons. Moreover, 100 Faces Star Sovereign's mind was shaken and unstable at that moment. It was the easiest moment for the inner demons to take advantage of. The others heard the conversation between the two and were shocked. They all looked at 100 Faces Star Sovereign on the ground in unison. No one felt pity for him. The weak were prey to the strong. 100 Faces Star Sovereign also understood this principle. He was inferior and had become the puppet of the inner demons. This was his fate. The inner demons glanced at 100 Faces Star Sovereign indifferently and shook his head with a sigh. "Unfortunately, he didn't manage to kill you. However, you've suffered such a heavy blow. Don't even think about escaping." The inner demons was full of confidence. His smile was like a sharp knife that ruthlessly stabbed into Chi Yu's heart. Chi Yu's eyes were filled with hatred. He suddenly turned to Ji Wuxiang and said, "Ji Wuxiang, if you really stand by and do nothing, I'm afraid you'll be the next target after the inner demons eliminate me." You also heard his lofty words and lofty aspirations clearly. Chi Yu wanted to pull Ji Wuxiang in. Now, only Ji Wuxiang's intervention would give him a chance of survival. Ji Wuxiang was expressionless and unmoved. He said indifferently, "It's easier to deal with the inner demons than to deal with both of you." These words were incomparably cruel. Chi Yu was horrified. He gnashed his teeth and said, "Ji Wuxiang, you're ruthless. You'll regret it. The inner demons are far more powerful than you think." Ji Wuxiang still turned a deaf ear to him and remained indifferent. The inner demons couldn't help but look at Ji Wuxiang with astonishment. His pupils suddenly shrank as he came to a conclusion. This Ji Wuxiang was indeed not an ordinary person. No wonder he could reach this stage. This was definitely not a coincidence. From his words, he could tell that he was a ruthless character. He had to be careful. "Chi Yu, don't waste your energy. No one will help you. You've already walked into a dead end and won't be able to escape even if you have wings." The inner demons joked. Chi Yu was unwilling. His gaze shifted and fell on the Empyrean fairy. His heart moved as he said impatiently, "Empyrean fairy, I'll remove the seal on your body. Help me." The Empyrean fairy shrugged and said, "I'm not the inner demon's match." Chiyu snorted coldly and said, "Then if I die, you won't be able to live either. Apart from me, no one can remove the seal on your body." Chiyu's words weren't empty. The seal he had placed on the Empyrean fairy was indeed extraordinary. It was a secret art of the Ninely tribe. Outsiders simply didn't know about it, let alone how to remove it. The Empyrean fairy had heard Chiyu explain the mysteries within, so she knew that Chiyu wasn't bluffing. If Chiyu were to die, then she might really have to be buried with him. She didn't want to be buried with Chiyu. But if she were to die, then perhaps she would be able to see Tangjing again. Who knew what would happen after his death? The Empyrean fairy didn't know that Tangjing wasn't dead yet. All the information she had was from Chiyu. Seeing the Empyrean fairy's fluctuating expression, Chiyu seemed to have grasped onto a life-saving straw and hurriedly said, "This is a win-win situation. Although you're not the inner demon's match, you can definitely restrain him. After all, you're the Emperor of Heaven's daughter." The Empyrean fairy glanced deeply at the inner demons. The inner demon smiled faintly and said, "You can very well accept his offer and then try to see if you can save him from my hands." The Empyrean fairy's survival instincts finally won over everything else. She said, "Chiyu, if you remove my seal, then I can help you hold him back. But whether or not I can succeed is still unknown. But if I'm still alive after today, then I'll definitely seek you out for revenge." Chiyu was radiant with joy after hearing this. He didn't care about revenge at all. Everything else wasn't a problem as long as he could survive the current crisis. "Seal, release." Chiyu made a prompt decision. The sword radiance in his hand flew up and landed on the Empyrean fairy's body with a swoosh. Bang! A muffled sound rang out as if some invisible shackles had been removed. The Empyrean fairy was radiant with joy. Even her hair floated up as if she had come back to life. To read the latest novel, please visit the website. You're tuning into the Dreamy Love Stories YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.